province has not made any recommendations on the total number of buildings permitted on lot. Staff are currently proposing a maximum of 2 buildings because I think our lots are not so large that.
Sorry, I'm late, folks. Just getting myself situated here. Let you listen in. I'll be commenting as we go.
Which is typically 1 or 2 buildings. Building coverage. Our coverage is proposed to be slightly lower than what the province recommended. Again, that's to do with our slightly larger lots.
And why is there a range there for the different?
There is a range there to deal with the variation in lot sizes, because we have some 33-foot lots. If we restrict it to 40%, then you run into buildable issues.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, let's see what they're talking about.
And in terms of off-street parking, again, I've highlighted where we differ from the province. I think our rate is slightly higher in terms of parking. But what's to note here is that the parking ratio for 1, 2, and 3 units is exactly the same as what we currently require for our existing single-family zone. So for the first unit, 2 stalls. Once you add a second unit, whether it be a house or a suite or a coach house, 3 stalls. Once you have 3 units, it's still 3 stalls, and we're adding 1 extra one if you're going to a 4-plex.
What about a 6-plex?
Okay. So moving on to the 6-unit zone. So again, this is for the darker blue areas that we'll see in the Lynn Valley area and the landscape Marine Drive area. Obviously, this is, remember from yesterday, my council made pass a resolution to seek an extension in that area, in which case the 6-unit SMUH may not apply. But in any case, staff are drafting the 6-unit zone. So since we've already seen the table and you guys are now proficient at reading this giant table, I'm not going to go through it one by line because most of the regulations are similar to the 4-unit zone. The main difference is obviously we are required to permit up to 6 units. You can see on the top, and all the other figures are slightly different, all as a result of that. So the density is slightly higher, and the coverage is slightly higher, just due to the kind of geometry of permitting 6 units. What's the same is setbacks, the number of buildings, and the total height. So in the 6-unit zone, you're still restricted to 3 in the front, 2 stories in the back. Now, one thing I will bring council's attention to is parking. So as some of you are aware from Bill 44 and 25 is that parking is not permitted to be required by municipalities in the 6-unit SMUH zone. So our minimum parking requirement must be 0. So
what?
As you can see, we've abided by the legislation and the requirement is 0. However, parking can be voluntarily provided by the developer. In that case, the district is able to set the dimensions and kind of other things related to the park, but we cannot require.
Where in the hell are people gonna park?
All right, so again, this is a visual representation.
Holy shit! Wow.
Topics that we discussed. So, for example,
it just gets dumber.
2 buildings. So there you can see a 1 building multiplex on the left. A duplex in the front and a duplex in the back. There is freedom of configurations, so we haven't specified exactly how you configure your units. So you could have all 4 units in 1 building, or you can have a duplex in the front, or maybe even a triplex in the front, 1 duplex in the back. So that is sort of up to the individual property owners to make it fit for whatever works for their needs. Again, this also illustrates the height. So 3 stories is the maximum. And on the right, you show that concept of 3 in the front and 2 in the back. And lastly, I just want to point out that partial basements are proposed to be permitted because partial basements are necessary to negotiate with the grades that exist in the district. And these renderings were proposed, were shown to the public in the first round of SMUH public engagement in 2024, and there was general support. So here's another rendering of what it could look like. So this is a rendering of an existing, obviously it's been converted to, for privacy reasons, to artistic kind of handwriting style. This is a typical flat neighborhood in the district where we chose to show both kind of the two-story new build, one-story rancher, and a three-story. In this case, this is.
So, I mean, just so everybody understands, right? Like, this is literally just, I mean, this is apartments.
Obviously, it's for illustrative purposes only, but this is just one instance of what it could look like.
Apartments, like
the reduced setbacks, you can imagine.
900 to 1,200 square foot apartments. Like, that's all it is. Apartments.
On the neighboring rear yards. You could have a side entry garage if you wanted to. So there's many ways of producing a. So the next rendering is an elevation view rather than a perspective view. Again, this is comparing the SMUH development in the middle, a three-story against a newer house that's constructed under our existing zoning bylaw, 2 stories on the left and on the far left.
Are they going with 7-foot ceilings? Like, how are they doing 3 stories? Yet it's not standing.
From our December 2nd workshop of as
like, I mean, this has got to.
Of what
I mean, this has got to be bullshit, right? I mean,
single family zone could produce.
This is the ceiling over here. Like, this is like 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. This is a very, very dishonest render.
Stand out, and we've seen this in many other municipalities. But I think over time, as other SMUH-like developments take place, and also as single-family redevelop under our new proposed single-family zones, most likely the urban form will be predominant. So that's really the next topic here is that kind of consistency within the neighborhood. So, neighborhood consistency. So I sort of mentioned this at the beginning. Because of the proposed exempted areas highlighted in purple, and the proposed SMUH areas highlighted in blue, we can imagine there'll be thousands of cases where a lot is zoned for SMUH, and right adjacent to it, there's a lot that is not zoned for SMUH. So staff kind of looked at that and thought, how can we, we are legislated to permit this type of density, but what can we do to ensure that there's kind of a maximum amount of kind of harmony between these types of developments that will inevitably be right next to each other or right across the street from each other. So what I have here is another table, and you don't have to look at it in too much detail, but on the left is the new proposed single-family zones that we talked about previously in the December workshop, and on the right is what is proposed that we just talked about right now. What I've highlighted are all the elements that are similar or identical between the two zones. And so really, my key takeaway for this slide is that there's more that's similar about these two zones than that are different. So, and what's different all stem from the required density to be permitted. So we're required to permit up 4, 5, or 6 units. But things like parking, height, setbacks, those are all actually identical. So
I'm still reeling at the fact that you don't need to have any parking whatsoever if you have 6 units. Like, no parking requirement at all.
the building from the street will be
Bizarre.
And to illustrate that, what I just talked about. So here is a side view of a lot. So you can imagine the properties are typical 120-foot deep lot. The front property line is to the left, and the rear property line is to the right. And the red dotted line shows the building envelope. So we talked about 3 stories roughly, and the gray is sort of where the mass would go, the 3 stories in the front and the 2 stories in the back. And the overall building envelope is actually identical for the proposed new single-family zone and the SMUH zone. So
This would be with a lane, right? If it weren't with a lane, it would have a bigger.
that's right, that's right. So this would be the lane. Obviously, without a lane, it would be 10 feet, as
Thank you.
mentioned previously. Good eye. So
So are we doing like 7.5-foot ceilings, 7-foot ceilings? Like, how are we gonna make this fit? That
what's different
doesn't make
is the
sense.
terminology. So in a new zone, the front building, we would just call it a house with a suite. And in this in the multiplex zone, we would call it obviously a multiplex. It could contain up to 6 units. The rear building in the new single-family zone would be called a coach house. And obviously in the new smooth zone, it could be a multiplex. So again, we're trying to kind of streamline the zoning bylaw by aligning, taking that opportunity that's presented to us with the zoning bylaw rewriting, change the single family and the legislative requirements to bring these three kind of together. Basements, here we go. So last I want to draw your attention to the issue of fully buried basements. So as council will remember from previous workshop, there's a host of reasons why there's staff and community support for bringing basements out of the ground, and that could be livability of the units, accessibility, impacts groundwater, construction costs, excavation, soil disturbance, etc. So we carry that principle over from.
Of course, I'm sure you did.
The proposing boundary changes to the proposed smoothing. So this is the current state of what's proposed for smooth. We have 3 stories with no basement, that's permitted. 3 stories with a partial basement, that's permitted. Again, let's do with in order to negotiate grade. And 3 stories where the first story is completely a basement, that's currently proposed to be not permitted. And at the previous meeting, certainly it was brought up by some members of council in terms of issues of non-conforming. In essence, the question is, what if I have a currently fully buried basement? So staff kind of went away and did some research on that topic. So I have a little table on the right. So as it turns out, even if you have a existing basement that's fully built below grade, the majority of the things that you want to do with that are still permitted. So for example, if you want to continue the use of your basement, that's totally fine.
Guaranteed, as long as you're not making it a micro inch bigger.
Add windows, you want to add window wells, again, that's still permitted. If you want to renovate it, permitted. If you want to repair it, permitted. In fact, the only 2 things you would not be permitted to do is to expand your existing nonconformity, so expanding a fully buried basement, or to fully replace a basement.
So again, folks, like the issue with this, right, is like most existing foundations do not meet current seismic restrictions. So this, it looks great and appetizing and wonderful, but in practice and in reality, this will not work. Like this does nothing for anybody.
I will note that variance processes do exist for that. So for example, with board of variance, and obviously council could grant variance in case of hardship. So, and lastly, I know I said lastly previously, but this was a topic that we did not have time to get into yesterday. We ran out of time. So this is the topic of SLIAs, or small lot infill areas. So I think council may have seen it through various subdivisions, but small lot infill areas are, in essence, 26 zones in the district, and those are highlighted in purple. You can see they're kind of majority in the western part of the district, but there's a couple in Deep Cove, where there's a historic lot pattern of narrower lots. So what the zoning bylaw basically says that in these special areas, as long as your lot can produce new lots that are at a minimum 10 meters or 33 foot, then those lots will be zoning compliant. So typically RS3, RS4 lots have much wider zoning requirements for newly created lots. So up to typically 18 meters. But the zoning bylaw basically, we've created policy Tamsin might have to help me out at some point. I don't remember when they came in, but at the time it was recognized that these areas traditionally had narrower lots. So they are suitable areas for gentle density through subdivision. Now, this is something that, a topic that we're going to raise with council to see in light of new regulations around permitting 4 to 6 units, is SLIAs something that council still wants to continue with the new zoning model? You know, perhaps, because obviously when SLIAs were created, we were not imagining that one lot would turn into 8 units or perhaps 12 units. So just something for council to think about. And if you have any questions, we're happy to kind of discuss that.
Kevin?
Yeah.
On SLIA, talking to Dan, are there restrictive covenants? When they were created, were there any restrictive covenants registered on title on SLIA properties?
The covenants, we typically register them as a condition of subdivision. So there are certainly covenants that we could limit the units, the covenants for other things like stormwater management, et cetera. But for council's discussion tonight, it's kind of forward look, because for lots that have not gone undergone subdivision, do we still want to apply this SLIA policy? Exactly. And obviously covenants override SMUH legislation.
That's right.
So if a covenant exists on title, that supersedes the requirements from Bill 44.
Can I just ask one more thing about the covenants then?
Yeah.
So the covenants take precedent?
Yeah.
So the covenants that were placed on lots down in Roslyn, Beachview, Baycrest, those, there's covenants on many of those single-family lots down there to protect the views that have gone to court and have been successful in those challenges.
Successfully upheld?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So that would take precedent as well.
That's right, yeah.
Mr. Milburn?
Too bad we didn't covenant everything.
Just to confirm,
Would've been a solution.
just to confirm Kevin's comments, yes, the province in their legislation indicated that covenants were still enforceable. However, they said they will monitor implementation of SMUH. And in fact, just last year sent out a questionnaire to local governments asking them about whether or not they felt private covenants, not even municipal covenants, but private covenants were in any way inhibiting the development of SMUH. Because they were pondering whether or not they would introduce legislation to overrule those covenants. So they haven't done that yet, but they're contemplating it.
The SLIA in the Cove, those ones are along Panorama Drive. Those have been around for a long time. I mean, the last SLIA we did was in Upper Capilano in Edgemont.
That's 2015, 2016.
Yeah, and it was very divisive. But yeah, I mean, why would we continue that with this new, it doesn't seem to make sense.
Yeah, so I think that's an excellent point. I would just point out one other nuance with this map. You'll see there's 2 types of purple.
Yeah.
So the lighter purple just indicates this property is within a SLIA. But the SLIA regulation still says you have to, in order to subdivide, you have to produce lots that are at least 10 meters. So we've gone through and highlighted lots that are at least 20 meters. So when we do that, then the number of lots, we have roughly 1,000 lots that are in these 26 SLIAs, but really only 85 or so of them are able to be that, or at least 20 meters. So yeah, that could be subdivided to satisfy the zone. Yeah. And I would just add one other note is, subdivision is at the discretion of the approving officer. So zoning compliance doesn't guarantee subdivision. So even if we kept it in there, it's at the end of the day, the approving officer still kind of takes that just into consideration in their decision.
Thank you. Can you comment on the number of subdivisions that have happened in these SLIAs, just like what the average number is?
Mr. Milburn?
Last time I looked back, about 15 years worth of records, we on average created about 6 new lots a year on average, but that included large lot subdivisions as as well as SLIAs. So SLIAs were in the range really of, sort of 0 to 6 a year, right, at the most. It's not a huge generator of density historically, relative to the number of, say, single-family homes that are torn down, right, and converted to other uses.
The only challenge was that for so long we've been producing lots that were 20 meters or less, that it just happened to be all the heritage homes that were on 70 wide lots. And so in Lynn Valley in particular, and around Ross, Baird, Harold, that section of Lynn Valley, it was like heritage home, heritage home, heritage home, that were all subject to subdivisions because they were over 70 wide, whereas the other. Mr. Roman.
I guess I can say that, the intent of this at the time was in a different circumstance, right? It was without small lot, small lot infill before SMUH. And, looking at what SMUH could bring in terms of the number of the new units and how we might try to deal with that, we think if we have to do that, if that is something that the province is mandating and council follows through and amends the zoning to SMUH, that SLIA is probably something that we would want to eliminate. Because it would create a higher level of density potential than originally conceived when SLIA was first developed. And that from the initial analysis that we did showing council servicing challenged areas, these areas could be challenged by the level of density anticipated by SMUH if you were to create the smaller lots. And so at this stage, we're recommending that this would probably be something that would go away, would be our advice.
Can I just clarify something? When you say, make it go away, if you're an existing SWIA, you get mistreated like any other lot, so you can't do. But then it goes against what was the original plan to control density in that area, is it not?
Yeah, well, every existing lot, the intention of SMUH is that you would get that 4-unit or 6-unit permission. But by eliminating SLIA means you wouldn't be doubling essentially that potential, because SLIA right now allows the potential of more lots subject to subdivision.
Right, but I'm looking at existing SLIA. So putting SMUH in will go counter to what was originally envisioned.
Yeah, even so, SLIAs that have developed are probably not in the 40 to 50-year-old range. They're in the 20 to 30, and probably still a viable product. Okay.
Okay, well, now this is really my last slide. So, in essence, we talked a lot about various things, and I'm sure that's a lot of information. So we're happy to answer any clarifications from council. But in essence, we're seeking council's input on these 4 key topics. The first one, the most important, is the council's feedback on the overall direction that we've taken in terms of drafting of the SMUH zones. Not just in terms of the guiding principles, but the figures, and you have them in your table in terms of the densities, the setbacks, heights, building coverage, parking, etc. The next one is the concept of ensuring maximum consistency between the SMUH zone and the new single-family zone, because they will be adjacent to each other in many cases throughout our community. The last one is, the second last one is our current stance on prohibiting fully buried basements. And the last one, as we just discussed, is the approach to whether to continue or remove SLIAs.
So I'm messaging with a friend right now, and
Discussion. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Zach.
hold on.
Give me, what's our average lot size again?
So, one of the things that I was just messaging with my friend about is the fact that there's no mandatory parking requirements for 6 dwelling units or whatnot there. And so, while the market may dictate that like you have to have parking in order for people to want to buy those homes, guaranteed there's going to be a bunch of dwellings that are built under SMUH that will not have sufficient parking. And what will happen is people will start to park in front of their neighbors or neighboring homes. And what that is going to do is that is going to adversely affect all of the other neighbors in the community. So the fact that there is no parking requirement absolutely boggles my mind. I think that is so dumb. Like, so dumb. What are we gonna do? Ride horses? Like, come on, people.
1,000 square, up to 7,500 square feet for an average lot in, spread between two buildings. Is that a valid representation?
Yeah, it would be, once you're approaching the 4 to 6 unit. If it's just a house, then it would be closer to, which is 5,500 square feet.
So if you have a 12,000 square foot lot and someone builds to the maximum, we're talking about a 9,000 plus square foot house on the lot. Is that?
Yep.
We do have absolute maximum caps for the zones as well. So I think Thompson could add to that.
And that's, and that's RS zone based?
Yeah, very similar to what we have in the 19 different single-family zones, where we're keeping that concept of having a maximum cap. So if you have one of the very large lots, you don't build a home that is huge, huge, huge. It's still a large home, but those caps are also tiered. So if you, and again, this is an option for council, but the basic concept, matching the single-family discussion we had last year. So the number looks bigger because we're counting the basement now and we're counting the garage now. But that, the home that was built next to me, easily 5,000 square feet under the RS zoning, on that lot, under the new zoning, on whether it's R2 or R3, they would be able to build the same size house. The difference is in the R3, you can divide it up into more units. So the square footage doesn't change significantly, it's how you divide it up. The one difference with the tier, and we heard this from the public, a few residents said, okay, we're interested in multi-generational housing. We know we need more options for our kids and for our parents, but we're worried about single-family homes getting too large. So can you cap the size and only give a little extra square footage if they build that extra unit? And so what we've done is we've kept the size for single-family homes and suites the same, so that existing homes remain conforming and don't have non-conforming problems. But if you're building a coach house, you get 500 square feet extra. And if you're in a multiplex or SMUH zone, and you build that 4th unit, you would get that extra 500 square feet and so on. And so we just tried to recognize that means
People will build it and then take down the wall and bring it back into their own dwelling unit, like after final inspection. Like, are you guys daft? Like, do you not understand how this is going to play out in reality? Like, good Lord.
that house suite coach house, because the other thing I would add to Kevin's presentation is it's absolutely key for these two zones to be very similar, because not only are they side by side, but many people won't be building a multiplex. They'll be keeping the house they have, and maybe over time wanting to put in either a suite or a coach house for family members. And so we wanted that ability to keep that single family path. I think that kind of answers, and hopefully I didn't go on too long. I tend to get excited about this subject, so my apologies.
No, I do think it's important to put it in there. So we've just put it in there that it's 0.7 FSR, 1 FSR. It's very important to say to a maximum in each group, and this is what the maximum is in each group. I think that's kind of relevant.
Yeah.
Because if otherwise you tell people that it's a 1 FSR, they're going to do a quick lot calculation, go, cool, I can build a 9,000 square foot house. And so what I'm looking for is an assurance that we're not just creating mansion size imposition. Again, with an asymmetry in the block face, because it's probably going to happen slowly over time, where you're all of a sudden going to have rancher, 9,000 square foot, but to the cap of the single family. So what are the caps of the different single families, just to give us a ballpark for those caps?
I think that the range is from, from 7,000 up to 8,000. Yeah.
Really, yeah, and again, the numbers sound big,
Yeah.
because of that basement piece, and they are big.
Exactly,
but
yeah.
What we
Maybe
see
I'll
getting built.
They're not big. They're freaking ginormous, dude.
put this kind of into perspective is you can start in terms of just talking about the average lot, right? We start with the floor and the ceiling. The floor, we're actually around 5,500 square feet. Those are building permits we're issuing today on those average lots, is 5,500 square feet with basements and everything. These are new builds that we're permitting right now in the last five or so years. So that's kind of where we're starting at. And like you said, we will be moving up to kind of close to 8,000 square feet as you go up to the units, going 4, 5, 6 units. So then you end up with units. So if 7,000 or 6 units, you end up with units that are just over 1,000 square foot per unit. So we did want to have units that were kind of suitable for families. We didn't want to, if we capped it at exactly what single family was able to do, then the units just get smaller and smaller and smaller.
I guess, you know, the example I keep coming back to is my own house. So my own house, I couldn't rebuild under this legislation. And the assumption is that it's the height that's the problem on the lot, even though it's a steep lot. The reality is the renderings that are drawn here are done fairly sympathetically in a gentle way. If you had the bad actor model and you went and said, but just as a warning, this is what
Thank you,
it
Mike.
would look like if someone
Thank you.
took the space, or if somebody moved the lot far forward, or
Yeah.
So that one there, the one back. So you have comparators with the neighboring property. Can you just sort of point to where a 5-foot or 10-foot setback looks like on the property?
So I believe in this case, the property line is right around here. So 10-foot setback would be probably around here.
It's currently a 30-foot setback from there, and so it'd be losing about a third of that setback. Is that correct?
That's right. And Tamsin can jump in again with more of the details, but the 10-foot setback is not for the entire building. It's only a portion. So again, it replicates what we currently allow in the front yard for garages. So we currently allow, you know, your building setback is 25 feet, but you're allowed to protrude into that 25 feet with a 7-inch garage. And we're proposing that space be used for living space as well. So it's not your entire building moving forward to 10 feet, it's a portion.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, a building with a flat roof moved to the front will be far more imposing than, you know, my house which has an almost 40-foot setback and is recessed further because the peak is in the middle of the.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point because to kind of consider the different impacts. I think from the street, a house right up to as close as you can get is imposing for people walking on the street. But for the next door neighbor, they probably prefer you to move your house as forward as you can, because people are not using their front yard as much, and they'd rather not have that overlook over their backyards. So
No. Let's use some examples like on Skyline, where that happened because the property owner wanted to move a pool in the front and a cement wall went up, and all of a sudden their whole front yard was a wall. That's maybe a perspective that you have, but I don't think that's shared.
Well,
We did survey on this point about bringing houses closer to the front, and that was well supported, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was like extremely well supported. And I think, while you're quite right, there are exceptions where you have used, in many cases, people see the front yard as something they have to mow, but not something they enjoy. There's special space where they relax and barbecue and so on happens in the backyard. And so it's the backyard they want to keep the sun getting to, keep more privacy and enjoy just more. And so the more you kind of slide further forward, the less impact there is on the earth. That was the logic, and I think why we got so much support for this idea when we surveyed last spring.
But it depends on the geography.
again, though, when we present the public with option A and option B, and option A is slam your hand in the door, and option B is kick a night table with your shin, right? Like, it's hard. It's hard to say that that's a representation of the will of the public. I'm pretty sure when we asked them if they preferred to have less front yard, we said in exchange for more backyard specifically, we didn't ask them, hey, do you want to change things right now and move to smaller front yards? We gave them two very carefully curated options to choose from that, I don't think are representative of status quo, future option one, future option two. Because I think you'd get a bit of a different response. And the reason why I say that is because in the cases that I'm aware of where they've done the side entry front garage, or they've had built the front right up to the edge of the property line, or had maybe had taken the average height that they could build from a weird spot on the property, which produced a bit of an anomaly. We had very negative responses from people. So I think that it would be better if we also showed an example of what could happen if it wasn't done sensitively, but was allowed within the rules.
Yeah.
And also what would happen to a lot of houses that would become non-conforming in the process, like mine, as an example. But, 'cause I don't have a problem with our position on the first one, which is the up to 4 units. I still don't have a full understanding of the 0.7 to 1 FSR. I'd love to see it broken out across the different zones and really, because what I heard there is that you could still build an 8,000 square foot under the new calculation. And yeah, I thought my house was big at 4,700 square feet, including the basement and the garage. And so 8,000 square feet on a lot sounds ridiculous, and not really what we set out to do at the beginning. I have a problem with the front yard setback. I'm not supportive of the 10-foot or the province's 6-foot. I think that determination of a setback was done based on, perhaps a municipality with different lot layout. Some of our lots are 140 feet deep, and therefore, why am I pushing forward into the front yard setback when I have plenty of space at the back? In which case, it would make more sense for the front yard line to be affected by how far it is from the back property line, because maybe it's not necessary to come forward because you've got enough lot depth. And therefore, we could preserve the frontage aspect of it. And since we do have some neighborhoods where obviously because they follow contours and stuff, you'll have varying degrees of backyard or total lot length. But for the most part on a block face, the lot length is pretty typical. When it comes to 3 stories versus 2 stories, again, you've heard my comments that I think I think there should be some approving officer flexibility on that, or some other piece in there, because sometimes on the shape of a lot, on the steepness of a lot, other things may make some sense. On the pitched or flat roof, actually the next 4 things I'm generally in support of, but I did just have one more question about flat roof, if I may. Maybe it's just a very West Coast view of it, but I kind of thought that flat roofs were generally to be discouraged because of our rain. We are on the edge of a rainforest. A flat roofs are much more prone to leak issues than peaked roofs are.
Flat roofs are dumb.
And so I kind of thought we would want to actively dissuade flat roof based on our local climate on the North Shore. Do you have any comment about flat versus pitched?
Sure, through your worship, I totally agree. I think pitch roof does work for our climate. And we, in our zoning bylaw, I think we encourage pitch roofs by just allowing different heights. The more pitched your roof is, we allow a different maximum height. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we can require flat roofs through the zoning powers given to us.
Yeah, it's development pipeline, we don't do that for.
Could we?
For small scale multi-unit housing, the provincial government suggests you not follow a development permit system to kind of track the style of the development. Theoretically, you could set a development permit guideline that said it had to be pitched through. For small scale multi-unit housing, we want to test that. We couldn't write it as a building code to track. It would have to be a design.
It just seems like it's something that we tend to, I think we should be encouraging or giving some kind of incentive to. Not the least of which is, we won an award for the Solar City project, and it was taking advantage of pitched roofs and put solar panels on at an angle that was going to be much more efficient directly on the roofs themselves. And flat roof, you have to build a whole big apparatus to be able to do it. But also, it just seems like it's a rain risk solar panel in future, but so anyway, on the latter ones, I'm generally in support of them, but again, little frustrated that my now small house relative to the maximum square footage won't fit within the guidelines because of the changes, and would not be able to be replaced in the event of a fire or an earthquake, I heard. So that's.
So unless variances are granted.
Yeah, but why should I have to come and ask permission to read what was on there necessarily? You should be sort of protected to do that. That's always problematic. And it's also something that insurance will only cover certain aspects of a rebuild. And if you're forced into a totally different design, insurance doesn't necessarily cover it in the same way. So, okay.
That's a really good
I haven't
point.
seen anyone else put their hand up. Oh, Councilor Erik.
So, but that's the non-conforming basement.
I have a partial basement.
Right. So I don't know why we have to make the basements non-conforming. If the basements exist, why can't we just allow them to exist? And if somebody wants to build a basement, why can't we allow them? It's this perspective that we have these issues with water, and yes, probably most people won't build a basement, but what if people wanted to build a basement? Or what if there was a situation and then they were having to ask, as the mayor points out, having to ask for a variance? Why are we, why don't we allow flexibility and let people decide rather than us being so prescriptive? I think that's my concern. Yeah, I think.
Because there's a staff that want boxes that they can check off. They don't want to think, they don't want to look at permutations or anything like that. They just want checklists. That's all they want. Checklist, checklist, checklist. Terrible.
Challenging, and we had multiple examples of speculators coming in, tearing down, building these massive houses and changing the nature of the community depending on where they put a garage or a swimming pool that completely negatively impacted. So although we've used a survey to guide some of our understanding as to what people understand, if you give them certain pictures and give them the best case scenarios, then it all seems so reasonable. But throw in the worst case scenarios, like the wedge house, like Sunnycrest, and then all of a sudden it's very different. And the impacts are a lot greater. And that's what we're not really seeing in this presentation. We're not seeing, the brought forward, we're having to imagine it. We haven't seen, we've seen on the news what some of these 4 and 6plexes look like in Burnaby, and there's no love lost in regards to that. I'm looking at the house down on St. Denis, those duplexes that we zoned on St. Denis down in Inter-River, where the backyards, they're all 3 of them were for sale. 1 sold, I believe. 2 are 1,700 square feet listed at $2 million. And 1 is 1,500 listed at 155. They, obviously a horrible time to list a property. There's the lot lines are as close to the road as you'll get. And I think it actually does depict these 10-foot setbacks. I can't remember what it was on that duplex, but in the photograph, I mean, the front yard the door is at the sidewalk. And then the backyard is completely covered in pavers and cement. There's zero grass on the property except for a strip that runs down two sides. And so that's really, the impact of what this is gonna look like in many cases.
Sounds romantic.
They're very good examples.
Sounds like a great place to live.
And then you look at, and I always love this one, this is 1032 and 4106. One's Violet, one's Mount Seymour Parkway, just down from the mayor's house, subdivided in the 1960s. They were 25-foot lots. The guy that did it built my dad's house, Pete Marquist, and it was subdivided decades ago. And then it was built. The mayor probably could stand in the building and touch the wall from both sides. That's how narrow they are, 25-foot lot frontage and 124 deep. And they sold, the most recent listing sold for 1965. 1965 for a 25-foot lot frontage. So it kind of puts into perspective what we're dealing with. And sadly, if this legislation had been about true multi-generational or affordability, I think we would be looking at things very differently. Livability. The unintended consequences, Corey sent out a significant list of unintended consequences based on the legislation and based on what we're doing. And we talk very seldom about the impacts to the water table, to the hard surface. I mean, for years, we've been trying to manage these massive houses that are being built, the 9,000 ones in the Capilano, a lot of them, and in the Cove. Massive homes being built, covered with hard surface. St. Denis is a perfect example of something that we actively rezoned. And the unintended consequences of our storms, regardless of whether you put a basement in, the St. Denis properties, they don't have basements, and they're all covered in hard surface. And where's all that water going, especially with the kind of, weather we get? So we're being asked to make these decisions without so much information. We touched on the financial cost of the infrastructure, who's going to pay for that. Certainly, the DCCs are going to cover a portion of it, but it's not going to cover that larger. And I'm wondering, Mike, you talked about, the advocacy that we need to, start. How are we going to keep track of all these unintended consequences and the challenges that we're going to face as these things evolve? We know Coquitlam tried this. We know they had to hire 3 more planners. We know that it cost a lot more money on their books. We know it didn't net out a huge amount at all. There was no affordable housing. It was all market. So how are we going to keep track of these unintended consequences and the impacts to neighborhoods and livabilities? If a new government is elected, these issues and legislations are again debated, and we have a second look at what we're trying to achieve with tools that are giving no flexibility and putting the kind of pressure that this legislation is putting on municipalities. Okay.
Councillors Hanson and Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for the presentation and very clear and detailed way that you put it forward. I'll answer 2 questions. First, I do support the prohibition on fully buried basements, and I also support eliminating SLEA in the SLEA subdivisions in the face of SMUH.
I just disagree with you.
I would like to
Just disagree with you, buddy.
The details of the tier density and also the 40 to 50 building coverage. I'd like to see that actually laid out for us.
Examples.
Yes, could you, Kevin, give this? We'll really concentrate, Kevin, and make sure we follow the issue.
Mr. Milburn?
Your worship, just while Kevin's looking at that, I'll give him a moment. Just to go back to an earlier comment by Councilor Mary, there was a question raised about the wedge house, and I think I probably had some errors. So just a reminder that the council amended the zoning bylaw 5 years ago in 2021 to prevent the excessively high retaining walls on the edge of the property line, and instead it's a lower tiered model that was amended at the time. And also from the wedge house, there was an issue about the height.
The elimination of basements, the retaining wall changes to the bylaws and whatever else, like any of these changes that anybody voted for and put in place in the last 6 years, like anybody that voted for like the elimination of basements, they need to be fired. They need to be replaced. Basements are free square footage, good, easy living.
And it wasn't just the height of the accessory building, it was the location of the accessory building on the upside closest to the downward property, the wedge house, that ultimately created a wall effect down their property line rather than the flexibility if we had.
Sorry to cut you off, Lisa, but like honestly, guys, right? You're now talking about allowing homes to be built higher, which is now going to block people's views. I don't know if you noticed it or not, but like there are people that literally choose to purchase homes on the North Shore so that they can have an ocean view or a mountain view if they're looking back up towards the mountains. If somebody's allowed to come in and build some gargantuan monstrosity that's going to block out the view, like that's why people pay the money they pay to live here. Like that was the whole purpose.
Formulas. I know Mayor Little also requested these, so.
So yeah, thank you, through your worship. Well, the formulas are as you see here. So we have the units on the left side. Again, this is the tiered system that is currently proposed. So for 1 to 2 units, density is actually the same for both the R2, which is the new proposed single family zone. R3 is a SMUH zone that we're talking about tonight. And that is 0.55 plus 662 square feet up to a maximum of 7,500 square feet. And that's where sort of the 0.7 effective FSR.
Folks, if you're not picking up where they're throwing down, they are talking about allowing people to build 7,500 to 9,000 square foot homes on properties that currently accommodate a 3,400 square foot home.
The density is 0.55 plus 1161. I can just use that math, yeah. 1161 square feet. And this in an R2 would be a house suite coach house. So, and then in R3, you can obviously do a triplex or duplex with a coach house or any other configuration. And R4, 4 units, we're moving up to 0.55 plus 1,600 square feet, up to a maximum of 8,500 square feet. And lastly, for the 5, 6 units, it's 1 FSR up to a maximum of 9,000 square feet.
That seems like a small square footage for a lot, though. Sorry, the example that you have is lot size times 0.55 plus 61.5 meters square. Is that an average lot size, or is that your common lot size, or what? Because I know it scales a little bit based on the lot size too, doesn't it?
Let's get out the old calculator.
I get that the lot size is a variable within the equation. But
So
it's
so you have a
You're right.
33 by
And it's
120
actually
lot.
a hidden slide, but essentially, this one was just to say, because most of our lots are over 5,000 square feet.
Times.
This is the math that applies. For lots that are under 5,000 square feet, then that's where you have the higher ratios because they're smaller and more confined.
Okay, so let's use
the
5,000.
building,
Let's use
the
5,000.
lot size is greater.
5,000.
But I think one of the things we're interested in hearing back and is on this notion of tiered density, because while it was raised by the community when we were having public meetings last year, it is one that does have impacts.
So
The other thing
3,400
to
square
note
feet
is
above
if you
ground
do
is what they're
this now
suggesting.
On a 7,500 square foot lot, you know, our most common lot size, then the first
Literally
tier,
double what
you're
we're
not
currently
at the
allowed.
7,500, you're only at, well, not only, but you're at 4,787. So it's, and then you would tier up from there, but you're not reaching that maximum cap unless you're a much larger lot.
Mr. Smith?
Yeah, I just continued Tamsin's math there. So if you went under that 7,500 square foot lot scenario, so my math matched Tamsin's for that 1 to 2 units would be 4,787 square feet. For the 3 units where you're adding that 161 square feet, you'd have a 5,286 square foot house. For 4 units, you'd be moving to 5,786. And for that 5 to 6 at the 1.0 full FSR, you're at 7,500.
All gross calculation, because there's no longer a net calculation.
What were the other numbers?
And all out of the ground.
Yeah.
So 4,787, 5,286, 5,786, and 7,500.
5,700. What was the other one? The last one?
That's
7,500.
3,000 square feet on a 10,000 square foot lot, and there's another 3,000 square feet behind it.
Councillor Hanson, just want to check. I believe the floor was yours.
Yeah, thank
Apologize
you.
for distracting, but it's yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, so those are the details. Now, I'm just gonna work that back a bit conceptually as well. I mean, the vast majority are gonna be 1 to 4s. The 5s and 6s are in the high transit areas. So the vast majority of the district is gonna be the 1 to 4s. And the basic formula here is 55% with an add-on of a little over 500 square feet for each additional unit.
That's right. So,
With these caps. Okay, no,
Yeah,
thank you for
and-
that.
we did do the checks, so you mentioned earlier, the current permitted floor space under the existing zoning bylaw for a single family is roughly 5,500 square feet for a 7,500 square foot lot.
Yeah, okay, thank you for that. And what about the 40 to 50% building coverage? Do you have a table for that?
Sorry, we don't have that, but we could certainly bring that back at some point.
And conceptually, though, if you've got a bigger lot, you're restrained to the amount of building coverage. If you have a smaller lot, you can go up to the 50%.
That's right, yeah, all our regulations, similar to currently, have a kind of trigger point at 5,000 square feet, where it's slightly different for lots smaller than 5,000 and versus lots bigger than 5,000. That's just kind of a logical point where you kind of need different formulas to make things work.
And then the other detail we haven't discussed is the lots under 3,000 square feet. Three units, Liz. I gather there's only 58 lots or,
3, I think, yeah.
Sorry, what was the question?
could you lay out the formula for that?
It would be the max for the under 5,000 square foot ones. And Kevin, I think I added a slide that shows, it gets kind of muddy because there's so many numbers on it, but it's
So,
just, yeah, see, the top line is under 5,000 square feet, and then the second color is the over 5,000.
So
the-
it would be 0.7 plus 662.
And in
oh,
terms
sorry,
of
this one.
your-
Yeah.
So it's always the first tier is the small lot, the second tier is the regular lot.
All right, well, from my point of view, thank you very much for indulging me in this. From my point of view, what you're proposing is realistic and
Terrible.
I think we have to be careful to make sure that we're not frustrating the SHMOO program, given that we're a delegated authority of the provincial government by having regulations that are not workable. And it does seem, based on the illustrations we put forward, that this is a workable plan. And
It's not workable. It's going to be a train wreck. It is awful,
for,
terrible,
builders and
bad
takes into
bad
account as best
bad
we can the
policy.
impacts on our communities. For the most part, I am supportive of these.
Jim, I could not disagree with you more, sir. I sincerely hope you do not get
Okay,
reelected.
so then it's Councillor Back and Councillor Murray. Councillor Ma, go ahead.
We're getting into a lot of details and the standards to accommodate SHMOOT while trying to rewrite our zoning bylaw. And normally, I try to stay at the, 50,000 square foot or level, but, it's in my head. Okay, but in this case, I believe we need to kind of look at these details, as Councillor Hanson mentioned, because we want to ensure we have a livable community. I do appreciate the staff's approach to try to tailor the standards as much as possible to be consistent between R2 and R3. And this will, in theory, preserve some of the existing characters in our established neighborhoods. So I have a couple of questions. When you limit to 2 buildings, is there a cap on each of the building? Like, can you have one dominant and one secondary? Like, you could almost put as much, can you put as much as you want into the dominant or primary building?
Yeah, I would say, through your worship, the front building could contain all your density. The back building, I think there would be some limitations due to the coverage, because you're limited to 2 stories, right? But there are also limits to maximum building length, limits to maximum building coverage in the rear yard. There's a bunch of other things that would make it infeasible to achieve your total density only within a rear building.
When we say we limit to 2 buildings, we don't necessarily indicate a potential split between the 2, like, 60-40 kind of thing, or is that permitted?
No, we don't have a prescribed split. That'll be just what.
Or a cap. I'm looking at trying to avoid having one big dominant dwelling on the property.
Yeah. Anywhere on the property or in the back?
Well, I don't want to get in.
Yeah, okay.
But, you start talking about these big homes. So I hear that it's limited to 2, great. But is it gonna be like huge and little, or can we say, 2 and the maximum that this building can have is 60% of the prescribed density lot? Is that something that's possible?
That is certainly possible, but that would require us to require people to build 2 buildings.
Okay.
Because if people can build voluntarily just 1 building, then,
Okay.
then we must make it so that they are able to accommodate all the density.
Ah,
Unless we force people to say, you must build 2 buildings, we must build a co-jumps, then we can't really get into mandating a ratio.
okay. Good answer. Okay, in terms of the off-street parking, 4-plex, you need to have a certain number, depending on the number of units, but a 6-plex, you don't. Is there anything that the district would be able to do to manage any potential conflicts between the neighbors? Like, are we getting into any discussions on that with our streets people, or is that something that's? Yeah, I was just thinking, if potentially a property that could be under SHMOOT developed 4-plex could be next to the 6-plex. The 6-plex has no off-street parking requirement, whereas there is for the 4-plex. Just looking ahead at unintended consequences, or, it's pretty obvious we're going to probably have some challenges there. What can we do to minimize that?
To minimize the challenges between the
Parking on the street and stuff. Is there anything?
well, the 6-plex were not permitted to require parking,
Off-street parking.
off-street parking. So the curb space is what it is. We can consider curbside management strategies, parking restrictions in the area, but we don't have a strategy. We have not considered a strategy for that at this time.
Mr. Milburn?
If I look at the provincial legislation, I think they're basically saying your strategy should be maximizing transit. So if you look at the 6 unit areas, they're based on the frequent definition and the regulation. So a way to manage it would be to support a bus rapid transit or higher levels of transit to reduce the demand for the parking. That's essentially what the provincial regulation contemplates.
Newsflash there, Mr. Milburn. Transit in North Vancouver sucks donkey dick. It is so terrible. Public transit in Vancouver in general is horrible. It's literally 2 to 3 times longer to get anywhere on a bus than if you drive yourself. Just saying.
2 years. The timing's off. It's not regulated on the BRT. It's regulated on a 15-minute service from at least one of the routes in that neighborhood. And so that already exists in both that corridor and Lynn Valley. It's not time to coincide with the BRT implementation.
And my point was, the question I believe was asking, in the future, like how could we mitigate in the future? I'm saying, well, enhance levels of service so that people have less demand for the parking space is essentially what the provincial government suggested. But of course, that doesn't necessarily come with a check, right, in terms of support. But we have the funding now with TransLink for the planning of BRT. That planning is going ahead. And it's
Oh,
in the merit
please.
plan, for future funding, subject, of course, to provincial and transit decisions.
It was laughable.
Mr.
These
Vance?
people are just
Good point on. I
so
noticed that,
out,
Mr.
so out to
Cohen,
lunch with the
online
true
is
reality.
able to provide a response.
Oh, I'm not logged in. Mr. Cohen, can you hear me?
I can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah, good evening, Council. So, Councillor Ma, the question you've raised is actually something that is on the mind of staff as well as we start to go into more densifying our single family neighborhoods. There's obviously going to be a higher pressure on the existing street because the street isn't expanding. It's the same amount of space and there's potentially more units coming to a street. Through our transportation team, we are going to be working on the curbside management strategy. As was shared in the presentation last night, we anticipate the uptake of SMUH to not necessarily be significant, but this is certainly an area that we're going to have to be looking at and figuring out as we see certain parts of our community starting to uptake some of these 4 and 6 plexes, trying to identify how do we manage this best with all those competing needs. As you've shared also, a 6-plex, while the province hasn't indicated that the municipality can't require parking on site, we would anticipate that those that develop on the North Shore recognize the transportation challenges that we have and that they voluntarily identify parking on their side as well. So it's not a perfect answer, I will certainly admit that, but it's certainly a challenge that we have.
A lot of not perfect
the new
answers.
provincial legislation, and particularly as we look at the existing transit and the lack of commitments for transit on the shore, it's potentially going to be a problem, but it all comes down to the market and the uptake of these 4 and 6 plexes.
Okay, no, I appreciate it, that Mr. Cohen. Just kind of going through this list here. In terms of fully buried basements, is there a case that could be made where a site needs a basement or? Like, is
Every
there
site needs a basement.
possibility that if we restrict it, then this site's not going to recognize this potential, or really anything that can be built underground can be built above ground? Like, I'm just trying to get an understanding where are we limiting anyone by saying that you can't build a basement?
Through your worship, I think that's a good question. I mean, there are so many scenarios in the district that I'd be hesitant to say there's absolutely no reason, but I would say for the most part, if you are able to build what you can above grid, but there could be really one-off scenarios where basement is required. And by that I mean a full basement, not a partial basement, because most of the grade challenges can't be accomplished through partial basements, where it's at grade on one side and fully buried on the other, which is permanent.
Would there be a process for someone to appeal? Okay. Fine. Then,
Mr. Milburn.
Your worship, I've worked with certain industrial commercial developers that really need basements for electronics, for all kinds of noise suppression and other reasons. But I haven't seen a residential application where it's critical for the living space. And the reason is most people want light and air access for their living. And it's cheaper. It's cheaper to build up than to build in the ground. It's very expensive to excavate and do concrete and all that work. It is more expensive. And to manage the stormwater, groundwater, everything else that comes with that. And I think, we've certainly come to this recommendation from years of consultation and discussions with council about how do we make a more livable community, and basements were seen as something that really increased excavations, increased the loss of trees and natural open space, with deeper basements, and produced in some cases really unlivable spaces for people that weren't.
All right, I gotta go help make dinner. I'll be back in 5 or 10.
Reflect, and because the province is looking for SMUH with 3 stories, right, and higher, we were thinking, okay, there's some usefulness to calibrate these things collectively and to create an overall new standard. It is new, it is a change, we understand that, but a new standard that could theoretically work for the community within the constraints that we have passed down by the province.
Okay. One last question, and I'll give you my decisions on your 4 corrections. Excuse me. What is the consequence of eliminating SLIA? Like, would that potentially reduce the likelihood of owners on small lots applying for subdivision? And if that's the case, is the subdivision really not as necessary under SHMU? So it's kind of a 2-part question.
Before SLIA, applicants had to apply to rezone individually on a site-by-site basis. They would rezone first, get council permission for that, and then they'd seek the approving officer's permission to subdivide. The SLIA was really just created for an area-based permission from council for people to just apply for subdivision without having to go through individual rezoning. People could still theoretically apply to rezone, right? If you eliminated SLIA, they just have a 2-step process as opposed to just going to the approving officer for subdivision. The challenge for us is we thought, well, it was never conceived of 4 or 6 units on the newly created lots. Right. And the servicing demand and the fact that you now have really narrow lots and the driveways and very little curb space to park all those, visitors and others that might be using the parking space, it just creates a whole lot of constraints that weren't contemplated when SLIA was first developed. And we thought it might be excessive, in terms of the permission. And the fact that it was all about creating sensitive infill. That was the purpose of SLIA. And SMUH essentially does that. It creates an infill opportunity for every owner with an existing lot units, up to 4 in certain lots and up to 6 in others. And so that seems to could satisfy the demand for multi-generational housing.
And then the existing SLIAs probably might fall under the SHMU of 3, because they're probably smaller lots.
Yeah, they're typically not that small.
They're not that small? Okay.
Yeah, we only have 53 lots that are under 3,000 square current.
Okay, so getting to your 4 directions, I'm gonna kind of go backwards. SLIA, we can do away with the prohibition of basements. Yes, given that what was said. I like the neighborhood consistency, so I like that. The general approach one, I'm gonna give you that a little later. I'm not sure yet. There's a lot here. Okay, thank you very much. I've got Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll take it back to the 30,000 square foot level.
Thanks.
It's really high up there.
What size lot is that?
I don't have a lot of questions right now. I think staff have done a really thoughtful job in preparing this report, and I think in presenting it very clearly. There's a lot here, but just in terms of the direction that you're looking for, I think there's fairly broad support for the prohibition of fully buried basements. I'm certainly hearing that in the community. People recognize the benefit of getting homes out of the ground for all the reasons that have been mentioned. And
What reasons? No. Who are you talking to? We literally had dinner together. Like, no.
I mean, it's a big change that's going to happen very gradually as best we can predict at this point. And when you see these new multiplexes being built in other communities, it's a big change. But I think there's going to be a big change anyways with what we're proposing with bringing basements up. This is a big change for the district, and it is going to change the look and landscape of neighborhoods over years and decades. So I think to do it now makes sense, and I think the neighborhood consistency with the two zones, SMU and single family, makes sense to do it that way. So for both of those items, I certainly support. I have some questions about some of the details as well, like in terms of the setbacks. I don't know if 10 feet is the number, and maybe it needs to be looked at that we have a higher setback there. I'd like to see what more configurations look like, because I think we are trying to be fairly flexible in what we're going to be allowing. So I'd like to kind of visually see some renderings of what different configurations would look like. On the whole, I'm supportive of what's being looked at here tonight.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Murray, followed by Councillor Pope. Go ahead, Councillor Murray.
So if we were to look at this, Kevin, so it's if we go to the 9,000 square feet, it's split up between 2 buildings in total, right? Okay. Or it could be 1 building. It could be 1 building. Okay, well, this is a 9,600 square foot home in West Van in the properties. I
wish I could see what she's showing.
Or $46,000 a year. It's on a 23,000 square foot lot, and it's 3 stories. So, just, you want some visuals? We should go on a bus tour. On a bus tour through the properties. Through the
It's a
properties.
good question.
Because the vast majority of houses up there are anywhere between, the new ones, between 9,000 and 11,000 square feet. You can get bigger ones. Then there's the smaller ones that are around 5,000. Those are the teeny ones, the 5,000 square footers. I have the benefit of experiencing all of this over 30 years. And when I got elected, basements weren't submerged. I lived in a rancher with a basement, and it had windows in it, our basement. All of it except the back wall, which was buried. It was the front part of the lot. The house that I owned, a 3-story, 5,000 square foot house on a 12,000 square foot lot. I've spoken about it before. It was a 3-quarter basement, had windows all throughout it. All the bedrooms had legal access, and it was a bright basement, and you could totally live in it. I had, people living in the basement. It was a really nice basement. Then when we started to begin redevelopment, 10 years in, the thought was bigger's better. And that was Ernie talking about, monster houses. And monster houses started to come in. And when monster houses were being marketed, they wanted full height ceilings. They wanted 10-foot ceilings in the entry hall. And North was famous for that. If you look at any of the North homes in the North Shore, he had big entryways and a dining room on the left and a living room on the right and the big island in the rear with the family room, the bedrooms upstairs. But it was the full with the spiral staircase went up the front. It was just it was a book plan. And that was why they submerged the basements, because they wanted to maintain those full heights, because they were marketing to a different clientele. And that is why they submerged them. And they were horrific. I remember going, when we were looking for a house to live in, I remember I went into one in Inland Valley, and I was horrified by the fact that you had to look up to look outside. And we allowed that. We absolutely allowed that. Now we're doing the exact opposite. We're pulling it right out, and we're adding more density. And those North houses, go and look at them. They're 6,000 square feet, 5,500 square feet on 3 levels, tons of them up in Inland Valley. There's some of them down on the river off the Seymour in my neighborhood. They're big houses, 5,500 square feet, 6,000 square feet. And we're talking about adding another 3,000. You live in a neighborhood with big houses. Look at some of those houses in square footage, and I would suggest any member of council or the community, look at Realtor.com and go through the houses. It will tell you the lot size, it'll tell you the size of the house, it'll tell you the levels, everything that you need to know. And you can start imagining what a 9,000 square foot house is gonna look like on a fraction of a piece of property like that. Or even a 12,000 square foot piece of property. A house like that is massive. So I ask, well, I'm curious as to why we feel that the pendulum always needs to swing from one into the other. First, the basements are submerged, now we're completely removing them and elevating all of that density underground that we didn't used to count above ground. And do we think that's gonna work out better? Like, I just don't think it's reasonable to suggest that we need 9,000 square feet on an RS2 lot in the district for multi-generational housing. In Blue Ridge, unlike Capilano, went through a period of time over 5 or 6 years, when all of those building permits were coming in, and it was when you were, I think, still on council, and Edgemont was pushing back so hard, the Capilano, because of what was happening to the trees, the lot lines, they were excavating for these full basements, and then it shifted, and in the Seymour, people were buying houses, old houses, postmoderns, post and beams, and they were renovating them. They weren't tearing them down and building new houses. They were taking old houses and they were doing some significant renovations, but maybe just some updates, because people were living differently and they didn't need this much space. We don't talk about the environmental impact of any of this. It is massive. The greenhouse gas emissions created by tearing down all these houses and building new ones is exponential. And we never talk about how we're measuring what we're doing. We look at this through one lens, and we don't look at the unintended consequences. And there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences.
Thank you, Councillor Mary.
What the environment is going to have to manage through. What about the transportation? And so I just, I think that this is, we've been dealt this horrific hand by the government, and I don't think they even understand the unintended consequences of any of this.
For sure,
I
they
think
don't
it's insane.
understand.
And it already is. It's so frustrating for municipalities to have to deal with this, and with no real little logic. I cannot understand for the life of me, in a community like ours, why the province doesn't think that we need some parking if we're gonna put in 6 units in a neighborhood up in Blue Ridge or in Lynn Valley. It is absolutely ridiculous. We are not in Dunbar. We are not in Kitsilano. We are not in the denser parts of Mount Pleasant or South Vancouver. I just think that we need to see a whole bunch more examples and really ask ourselves why we need to pull all of that basement out. Why does a family of 4?
Because some hippy dippy bullshit people decided that groundwater is getting to the streams too fast. I mean, it's the most absurd thing.
And you've had multi-generational,
8 people living.
you have 8 people living in your house. I had 7 living in my house. I had 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and there was tons of room. Like, so I question, it's always this feast or famine with us. Just because we don't want to do those basements anymore doesn't mean that there is an inherent right to pull out all of that space underground and pull it up, where the sun shines. It is just absolutely not necessary. And we are contradicting ourselves when we talk about environmental impact and,
Yes.
doing more with less or less with more.
Thank you.
And trying to manage a better way of living going forward. All we're doing is just, everything is bigger, spend more, buy more, shop more, build more, tear down more.
Right.
Well, I'm not gonna make a decision on this. I'm gonna vote against it if you're asking for a decision tonight, because I don't think we have all the answers. And,
Tonight's is to help them prepare a bylaw for our consideration at a regular meeting of council. And so the input we give will help them narrow that, so we don't have to craft it again on the floor at that time.
But we have asked, there's many of us that have asked for more examples of things, so is that gonna be coming back? How are you going to do that?
We'll ask at the very end, what's next, and I'm gonna come to you, Mr. Zeng, to do a full-on what's next at the end, if that's okay. The next speaker I have is Councillor Pope, and back, Councillor Pope, go ahead.
I'll defer to Councillor Back, and then if you come back to me.
Okay, Councillor Back, go
My
ahead.
point was just like, if staff could just quickly clarify the basements, because Councillor Murray mentioned several times that we're prohibiting basements and bringing it all up, but we're not prohibiting basements altogether. Partial basements are still very much allowed as part of this, yeah. So I just wanted to clarify that.
But you don't have to have a partial basement if you don't want, right?
We're getting rid of the incentive to having a
Yeah.
basement, and I think that's fair.
I think it
That's
was
been the
important to
discussion
clarify
that we've
because-
had all the way
Bingo.
along.
Yeah.
Discussion
Um,
on it.
But can we clarify, you can bring 9,000 square feet up above, it doesn't, you don't have to have a basement.
Correct.
That's right.
Yeah,
And just
so
to
that-
clarify.
there's-
the
Yeah.
9,000 square feet
Absolutely
could only be
atrocious
permitted
decision
for 5 or
making.
6 units, so you can't have a house that's 9,000 square feet.
8,000.
still-
Dumb like a
not
bag of
some,
hammers.
For dwelling. And the other thing to consider, which we haven't mentioned at all tonight, is each of those escalations has quite a significant contribution to the municipality for the additional dwellings that are in it. So,
But if it's stratified, then it's market.
no, I know, I'm just saying that it's unlikely that someone's going to build a building for one family that's gonna be anywhere near that size, because they would be at the 7,500 cap, or
What-
if it's only 1 or 2 dwellings, it's the lower number on it. And
They do
then
it in West
anything
End.
over 3 dwellings, they have to pay the per unit, per dwelling surcharge on it. Mr. Miller.
One helpful clarity, I have a question for Kevin that I think council would be helpful. The current caps in house suite and coach house scenarios, so our current zoning, are those caps generally in line with the caps being recommended here for the 1, 2, and 3 unit sites?
Yeah, they are in line. Yeah, so what we have proposed for the 1, 2, and 3 units is almost exactly the same as what you can permit under our existing zoning. It's just more of it will be above ground.
Yeah, because
So for sure, I recognize that the buildings will be bigger visually.
more.
Councillor Back, you have the floor.
I just wanted to clarify that. That's
Okay,
it.
Councillor Pope.
Thank you. Thank you very much for this work. It's very well laid out, and I appreciate the depth of it. Thank you. I actually just have a couple of quick questions. The subdivisions that fall out infill areas, how many SLIA units, SLIAs are there? Lots?
There are approximately 1,000 SLIA lots, but when we do the lot width calculation, only about 85 of them are wide enough to subdivide into 10-meter lots.
Okay, that's what I thought you said. So only 85 would be sort of eligible potentially. And so I support the staff recommendation on that with not enabling SMU on those. And I also, of course, support prohibiting fully buried basements. I'm about the setbacks. I'm also supportive of what you propose there, which is basically the same as what we have now.
Well, Catherine, I've enjoyed our conversations over the years, and I don't think you're going to be happy to hear me say this, but I could not be more violently in disagreement with yourself and Councillor Hanson. It seems like Councillor Back is kind of sort of in the same boat, but maybe a little bit more softly. Sorry, I should have muted you. You're wrong. It really is that simple. We do not want to have Surrey monster houses here in North Vancouver, I don't think. Thank you very much.
I would like to see that engagement again, if that could be sent out between now and the next time this comes forward, because it wasn't just surveys, as was mentioned. It also involved meetings at
The pop-ups, yeah.
the pop-up meetings, but also I think there was one at school, and it was a lot of different people showing up who had a lot of input, and it is not to be ignored. Density, fine with guiding. So overall, I'm very supportive of the general approach to SMUH. Thank you.
I had a question about a primary, the maximum size of the primary dwelling. So let's say I'm in the 4 units total camp. I've been bonused 500 square feet for the additional, one of those additional units, I believe. I've got about a 7,500 square foot total then on a pretty, not an extraordinary lot, but 10,000 square foot lot as a ballpark. It's not an extraordinary lot for the district. What percentage am I required to keep as the primary versus the minimum units? I mean, we've produced lock-off suites and small units in the 300 square foot range. The forum proposal is 140 square foot to 170 square foot. Can someone just produce 300 square foot dwellings and then produce a 6,500 square foot main house? Or is there a ratio of the unit sizes to make it so that if it is a large house, that some of that benefit, a significant portion of that benefit, is going to producing larger secondary, tertiary, quaternary, whatever you want to call it, additional units? I mean, with our overarching goal of trying to produce family units generally where we can, or are we creating a workaround where somebody can produce a bunch of small lock-offs and then produce a massive main house?
Captain, do you want to?
It's a great question, and it's one I've been mulling. And part of the reason I was thinking about it was about 6 months ago, you said to me, should we have a minimum unit size? And we used to, and we don't have that anymore in most zones. And it was one of the reasons we were debating the merits of a tiered density, because just as you used to see, back in the day, people pretend they didn't have a suite and then put the suite in afterwards, you could see almost the reverse. Oh yes, it's a suite, but it's actually added into the main house as a way of making your main house larger. Because in the North Shore market, you do see builders like North that like to build luxury homes. So it is something that we're very cognizant of.
Whoa.
But there are
Spruce Hill
ways
builds
to
luxury
use
homes.
to
Nort
manage
builds
that. It's
decent
no
homes.
problem,
Let's
right?
be,
Minimum
come on.
Unit size for secondary suites or for additional suites in the SMU situation. Or we could just not do the tier density, that we're not married to it, but just recognizing that on the average lot size, then the units do get quite small. And if we want those family-oriented potential units, then it's something to consider. And also, if you think about the different people who have reached out over the last year under just regular house suite coach house zoning, to say, I really want to build a coach house when I'm having a problem, that 500 square feet extra for the coach house might make all the difference for them. So that was part of why we were thinking about it, even for the R2, the house suite coach house zone, as well as potentially increasing it in the multiplex zone. So very good question. You're bang on the money there.
I'm supportive of a minimum unit size, and if we're giving a 500 square foot bonus, we should be putting that bonus into the units, or in some form. I'd be supportive.
100%, Mike. Agree with you on that.
All right, the whole topic makes me grumpy. I'm not blaming staff for this, but you know what would make me very happy? You can call it the grumpy person slide. A rendering that shows the worst case scenario. And not because I want to dwell on the worst case scenario, because I'm trying to anticipate
The worst case scenario.
the most impactful one that we're going to get called out on. It's not going to be the guy that builds sensitively amongst the neighbors, similar to the block face and whatever. It's going to be the person who doesn't give a rip about the neighbors and just wants to cube out the building on the site. And so a rendering that shows, just so you know, with these guardrails, this is possible. It's not likely, but it's possible. And you could, change your setbacks or do something else to address it.
Sorry, yeah, we can come back with that. I mean, that'd be easy to model.
Yeah.
You don't even have to put windows on it.
Yeah, just ask the first builder out there. They're gonna, they'll do it for you. Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Vancouver special, right? The Vancouver special is what it was, you know, this is what I can do to cube it out and have no other problems. And so all of a sudden that just got repeated everywhere and all the Vancouver special for it. Okay, but I do appreciate staff's efforts on this. But I'm still having a lot of difficulty with us being in this situation. I've made my comments yesterday. They apply to today. I don't need to repeat them. But I appreciate the feedback and the effort that staff have put into this. I have no further speakers at this time. I'm prepared to go to the public to see if they want to use the last 10 minutes for public input. Okay, I'm going to go to the public. Would anybody like to speak? Ms. Gregor, please. And I have a virtual participant as well, Erik, Jensen, and David, and then right there. So that'll be the 4 speakers. Ms. Gregor, go ahead.
Mayor Little's request for hard case examples of the worst, and not just the biggest, but for the very.
Recording in progress.
We're just getting the virtual participants moved over to the panel. David, I see you're over on the panel, and Erik Jensen. So I think Erik Jensen, you were first. Erik Jensen, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can clearly. Welcome. Go ahead. You have 3 minutes to address the workshop.
I don't need 3 minutes. I won't take up too much of your time. I think that I think the thought of having Surrey monster homes in our backyard here on the North Shore is a frightening prospect to me, anyways, as a long-term North Shore resident. I really quite scared of that being thrust upon us. The Cavalierness of where we are taking basements right out of the ground and putting them above ground, also alarming, and that we have done so already. I mean, you guys all know already, I've spoken a lot of times about that in front of you, so I'm not going to go down that road too much today. You guys all know where I stand on that particular fact. And yeah, anyways, I've spoken to that lots. So one of the things that I found interesting, though, was staff was suggesting that people are going to get more FSR if they're going to build additional dwelling units under the same roof. And I was, listening to that and hearing that. And as somebody who's actually doing this work on an ongoing basis, guys, what's going to happen is people are going to do this work, build these structures, build these homes, and then the second they pass final inspection, a wall is going to come down, a modification is going to get made, and there is absolutely zero way that anybody in the room tonight or that works at the DNV is going to be able to manage or monitor those sorts of activities that happen after the fact. So, I mean, I don't know what the solution is. And Mike and Lisa, I am fully on board with where you guys are coming from. I think that the province is way overstepping, and people really aren't understanding or realizing the magnitude and the ramifications of forcing this down our throats. And certainly there really is, I have heard a lot of, I don't know, and we'll figure it out from staff when it comes to how are we going to accommodate and facilitate this increased demand. Like, I mean, where are we going to get the additional fresh water from? Guaranteed the sewage treatment plant has been built for the number of people that are here on the North Shore currently, not for the 50% or more people that could be accommodated by this new type of housing. So I'll leave it there, guys, but I think we really need to be really, really careful and thoughtful about how this is going to happen. And again, like I don't think anybody wants to have Surrey monster homes in their backyard. Like, that's just not the North Shore community, and I think we got to fight hard against this.
Thank you for your comments, Erik Jensen. Virtual participant David, can you hear me?
Recording in progress.
To address the workshop.
Thank you, councillors, and thank you, Erik, as well. To kind of further talk about the monster homes, I do want to further clarify that as well, because I do hear conversation about monster homes and multi-generational family living. But I understand that when we talk about 4 and 6 units, these are stratified. These are separate units on the market. And that does not imply one homeowner in 6 units or any form of multi-generational family living guarantee. I do like the idea of a minimum size unit, and I do think I like the idea of a maximum size unit. And I don't know if there are codes and regulations, including fire code, around insulation, multiple entrances, et cetera, that each of these units would have to live up to put anyone at ease for walls coming down inside and everything else for modifications afterwards. In terms of the FSR and trying to make spaces that are good for families, I am very interested in staff to relook at the 6-unit SMU. A lot of those areas, I think there's actually a bunch of lots at 4,000 square foot. So at a 1 FSR, we're talking about studios and maybe the odd 1 bedroom going in on those lots very close in the marine corridor. And as well, I'm curious if in this conversation around basements, if underground parking is considered. I think for, again, some of the smaller lots in higher density areas.
That's a good one. I like that.
The market is considering, building to what the market needs around parking. The only way to even have units above 600 square foot would be if some of that FSR is, if the parking is actually underground in that aspect. So thank you for your guys' time and consideration with all these things. And I hope that council and staff are able to get to a great point in planning ahead for our communities here in June.
Well spoken.
Thank you for your comments. David, joining us here in person. Yeah, Paulo, please.
Yeah, and I like to have higher, like, 2024 was happened in 2019. We know from, we get to send back on the property lines. So now it just happened a couple days ago in Vancouver, the water main broke down, over 20 vehicles. So I'm supported to be all the basement up, or maybe portion, like a couple feet more up. So that's what it is. In the little line there. Now, I walk at the front every time. I see sand back there on the front of the road. And then we cut the bridge. The water car had to go over the bridge. You know that? We cut the bridge, station to the bridge.
Yeah.
So now, just in case the water, Hillmore Creek, jump over, at 2024 myself, I went to clean them up the ditch. It was very cold. Really, the fireman, they come out. Okay, and it was lots of wood. First of all, we have to maintain those creeks. And they have a couple times, Frederick, to our last score, full maintenance. Now they haven't frozen. So now why we have to go 7 feet down on the ground? I know those houses are 60, 70 years old, 80 years old. Let's change in 2026. I know you're saying I'm confused. We said I'm confused. Everybody's confused with 2026. I don't bring West Vancouver, rich property, very rich over there. Let's make something better for North Hill. Make them stronger. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Paul.
We just have
Mr. Zhang.
Summary slide with Jason here on the next steps.
Okay.
Yes, again, thank you for a great conversation over 2 days. We spent over 4 hours in the last 24 hours talking about shape, and had some great feedback from council in terms of helping shape how we will move forward with this. So we will be undertaking a very kind of limited form of public engagement at the informed level. It's outlined in the report. So the next community bulletin will be on the topic of Bill 25 and kind of providing some facts to the community about that, and also a segment on the zoning bylaw rewrite as well. And there'll be links in there for people to make comments on both of those topics to staff as well, so that we can have some form of public engagement in advance of that first reading in mid-April. That's pretty much what we were able to do given the context and timing that we had. He will be coming back in March with a report on the extension and some of the options around how to address the issues that we talked about in terms of preserving the frequent transit area around Lionsgate. So you'll be seeing that in March. Similarly, another report in March addressing the further analysis on rental tenure zoning and that affordable or supportive unit for the 6th unit. That will be provided to council as well. We will have some discussions internally, perhaps about other opportunities to bring back those examples and rendering.
So guys, I mean, let's take a moment and look at how misleading this particular image is here, right? Like, this is a massive set of stairs going up to 2 front doors. And while this looks like a plausible 3-story building here on the North Shore, I can tell you that even getting a basement, and this is going to be at least 4 feet in the ground, this basement, based off of just like rough calculations here. At least, because I mean, these stairs are going to come up to, 2 inches probably. I mean, these stairs might actually be like the landing might be flush with the floor. So, I mean, you can imagine, right? Like, there's got to be at least 3, if not 4, possibly even 5 feet below this window to get to the floor of the basement below. And even getting that level of basement currently in the district in North Vancouver is almost impossible. The stormwater management hoops that you've got to jump through to build something like this is still egregious.
It was a lot of work on staff's end, and we definitely kind of empathize and sympathize with some of the concerns that were mentioned, the unintended consequences, the environmental impacts, the bill form impacts to the neighborhood. And perhaps something, worth mentioning is, the difference between Bill 44 and Bill 25 is Bill 44 set out all the regulations and what we have to implement and the guidelines that we have to consider. But what's key in Bill 25 is the province has given itself the power to enact zoning bylaws on our behalf, specifically relating to the siding, size, dimension, location, type, form, or density of housing units. So it's under that context, we've had these kind of internal debates, almost the same conversations that we had tonight. It's, oh, okay, would this work? But these are the province recommendations, etc. So we've had these discussions. Really appreciate the comments tonight, and I would look forward to bringing back the next steps.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Council, we've completed the business of this evening's meeting. I'll accept adjournment. Accept it from Councillor Ma. Thank you very much, staff, for your presentation, and we're going to give everyone a chance to have a stretch. We'll start the next meeting in about 5 minutes' time, and move along.
All right, well, we are in a bit of a recess there. They will be back for tonight's session, which I don't know that I had really been super passionate about streaming. This SSMUH stuff is a big deal, folks. It's a big deal. You had better stop being apathetic and figure this stuff out, because if you don't get involved, if you don't get vocal, monster Surrey boxes are coming to a neighborhood near you and possibly to a property right beside you, right? Your view gone. Your aesthetic of your neighborhood eviscerated, right? Like that is the level of, I cannot understate that. And I'm not trying to be an alarmist here. I kind of am, I guess. But this cannot be understated here, folks. Right? Like, we have got to get on top of this and be aware of what's going on. Okay? Please. I'm going to keep the stream going for the moment. I'm going to see what tonight's workshop's about on my other screen here. And maybe go help the missus finish up making dinner, although I think I can hear it's almost done. Anyways, stay tuned.
economic development, and we also have Tahar from transportation engineering, along with all our community planning colleagues. And so
All right, I'm
this
back.
work has really taken a village, as we said in the report. And this is
Sorry about
not,
that.
this is in the
I'm
words
going
of
to mute my
DNV.
mic and turn off
And
my
for
camera
those of
while
you
I
who
eat
know
dinner
that
and listen
she,
in. If I have something to say along the way, I'll definitely say something.
A planner with deep knowledge of the district. So she is also part of our team. I wanted to acknowledge her, and no doubt she's
Making
right now.
sure that we're doing our job right. So can we just look at the evening agenda? So as I said, tonight, we're going to be talking about focusing on the employment zones. There's some meaty discussion and question we have for mayor and council, but we wanted to present the bylaw in 3 parts. The first one is want to have an overview of the structure of the new bylaw and how we intend to roll out the new bylaw. So it may be quite dry and technical, but we kind of wanted to give you a flavor of the depth of the work that we have to undertake. And then we're going to focus on commercial, light industrial zones. And then we're also going to be talking about a parking section of the bylaw, where you will see that staff are recommending some key strategic updates in order to streamline the application review process. And so it is a lot of material. As I said, we do have a second date reserved for this. And so we'll see how far we go. So I really look forward to the conversation and your questions. With that, I'll pass it on to Tennyson.
Thank you, Yan. I realized I can't actually see the slides. I'm going to wriggle a little bit. Oh, there we go. Yes, yeah, thank you, sorry. Moment, okay. Hello again. So I want to take us through a few slides to just remind us what the project is, what we're trying to achieve, and just kind of set the tone a little bit and give you a general overview before we get into some of the meaty discussions. So first of all, what is zoning and when is it used? It's a bit of a funny bylaw to have a process on, because so much of the time, even though it affects every single property in the district, people don't think about it, right? You don't need to worry about it 99% of the time. It's only when you're building, because it regulates where you build and how much you build, or when you're looking for a new business location or looking to expand a business, that comes into play. The other thing to keep in mind, we've discussed it earlier this evening, is if a zoning regulation changes and something becomes non-conforming, you do have grandfathered rights. And that is going to be key, but by and large, you'll see that we're trying to keep things with the same intent that they have. We're keeping what's good about that bylaw and moving it forward, and we'll get into the details as we move along. So probably not going to do details on that. Okay, you've all seen us lugging around these big binders. The bylaw is currently something like 1,000 pages. It's a living document written in the 60s. The framework is from the 60s. There's been 1,400 amendments. And while those were all done with great intentions, and some of the recent really good work is coming across to the new one, it's time to modernize. It's very confusing, convoluted. There are layers of regulations on layers of regulations. People we work with regularly are begging us for an update. It needs to be simplified. It needs to be easier to understand. It needs to have zones that show what we're asking and that match our OCP direction. And that's going to be key, and we're going to get into that a little bit later too. And again, when Yan mentioned it takes a village, we have literally been working with every team in the district to think about the policies that council has endorsed and weave them into zoning as appropriate. So it really is about taking policy and codifying it in an up-to-date zoning bylaw. So you've seen these. This is essentially a page I'll refer to from time to time, and it shows the 1965 zones and their equivalent proposed zones. Don't get married to the names, because I tell you, naming a zone is harder than naming my children. It's really tricky. You keep thinking about different ways to say it better. But the intent here is that we are keeping that light touch, implementing the OCP policy, trying to create a seamless transition where if you have a park zone today, there'll be a park zone in the future. We think about the intent of the zones that we have and how we can carry that intent forward, but perhaps in a simpler and less wordy way, and perhaps in a way that requires one zone instead of 19, and some of those problems that we have. We're really looking to keep a very stable setting for the bylaw so that daily life isn't impacted. The change will happen, but it may happen over the next 60 years, not necessarily over the next 6 months. So just kind of building in on this and giving you an example. Right now we have 5 park zones. The intent is to have 2 park zones. The park zones we have are kind of grouped into ones that are about active parks, where you can have sports fields and playgrounds and running tracks. There will still be a parks and outdoor recreation zone that is very much about that. And then we have another set of park zones that are about natural parkland, and we will have a new natural parkland zone, which is primarily focused at thinking about the preservation of the forests, the rivers, but still allows those recreational uses that we love, like running on trails and maybe going kayaking if it's one of the waterfront areas, that kind of thing. So really keeping that intent and moving it forward in a kind of modern system. Another example of this is currently we have a set of institutional zones that are called public assembly, which I always think is a bit of a misnomer because sometimes you assemble, but sometimes you don't. Anyway, we are trying to think about what are the public zones that we really need. And we have Capilano University. Why not create a university zone that works for the campus and creates a simple, easy to use set of regulations? So should they get a grant for a new building, we're not going through a difficult process like we did when they got the film school money to try to, on a dime, switch and create an opportunity for that building, to essentially tailor it to what they need. Similarly, we have several really key economic drivers in our community that are tourism-based centers that, again, don't have zoning that really works for their sites. And so it's thinking about how we can create a tourist resort zone that works for Capilano, Suspension Bridge, and Grass Mountain. Timeline. Yan touched on this. This project really got going with council's instructions in 2024 to try to work through this project within your mandate. And so that's really what's been driving our timeline. I won't lie though, if we can finish this spring, and it makes it much easier to bring in SMU because we'll have a framework for the bylaw to hang the SMU regulation on. But it's not essential. So this was more about trying to move it forward in your mandate and before the summer break. I'm not married to a date, but we are aiming for April introduction. Along the way, of course, you saw a lot of single family discussion last year when we brought it forward in April and again in December. We did complete a draft in December of this past year. And since that time, it's all about refinement, testing, getting out to the interest holders in the community to talk about what the issues are. We're inviting people to reach out and do deeper dives for those people who are interested. We've had a lot of interest holders do that. So again, moving towards April for bylaw introduction, and if council so chooses and it moves smoothly through the process, it could be adopted in either late May, early June, or early July. Community engagement. So as alluded to, there's been quite a lot of work over the last 18 months, and we're really in the stage of direct engagement with stakeholders. I don't think I'll dig into this more, but of course, if there's questions, I can dig into this. You've seen this slide before, but we include it again just as a reminder that whenever you're writing a major project like this, you're trying to balance key council policy, key community directives. So to give you, and tonight we're going to be focusing a lot on the economic development, but we're also going to be thinking a little bit about how to maintain existing development potential and what that means to property owners, along with balancing the other objectives of the community. Here's an example, promoting climate resilience. I forgot that black box. So when we're writing any of the regulations, we think about how we can get closer to our goals around addressing the climate crisis we're in and recognizing that we need to be a more resilient community. So we're thinking about more sustainable options. We're looking at how we can encourage more innovative building design, where we can foster biodiversity and discourage higher risk forms of construction, like the basement discussion we had earlier this evening. A little bit on the form and function or the user experience. One of the great things about having a 1960s thing is there's a lot we can improve. It's going to look a lot better. So yes, it's lots of words. In the old version, we're going to have still some words because they tell the story, but also where we can, we're going to be supplementing that with diagrams, with tables. So especially makes it easier for people who have English as a second language, makes it easier for all of us just to be able to find things, read them easily, move forward. The zones will have consistency, so you'll always know, you start with this bit, you find the landscaping regulations in section so-and-so. It's just gonna be an easier thing to use. There'll be links built into it, and, oh yes, and color. Color is based on the land use map. So when you're going through the document, should it be old school and you're actually paging through, oh, I'm in yellow, that's housing. I'm in red, it's commercial. It's just another visual cue to make it a little bit easier. Okay.
That's actually a pretty good idea. I agree with that.
About implementing it, but I wanted to kind of dig into that a little bit more. Yeah, this is looking a little pale, but essentially the zoning map will look very, very similar because what's commercial today will be commercial in the future. But to give you a little bit more detail on what that means, here we have a picture of Marine Drive. And as many of you know, about 20 years ago, it was zoned C9, which is the Marine Drive zone. The Marine Drive zone is for 4 stories of commercial, and it allows commercial on the ground floor and residential above. So to keep that intent of protecting people's property rights, we would replace the C9 zone with a new general commercial C2 zone that is similarly 4 stories, commercial on the ground floor, same density, no change. So that both properties shown in this picture, one that has not redeveloped and one that has redeveloped, would both have the same zone as they do today. The one that has redeveloped would have a set of regulations that matches the building they have. And the one that has not yet redeveloped, should they ever wish to redevelop, would have the same potential that they do today. So it's about recognizing that value. But also, one thing I will note here, and I think there was a question about it, we are not upzoning or pre-zoning. So if the OCP has a site that has higher density than the existing zoning, we are just going with what's on the site today, so that the rezoning process can still unfold the same way it does now, allowing council that same discretion to consider what the community might need through that rezoning process. But as we talk about that rezoning process, we have shelf-ready zones that will match the OCP designation. So imagine you're in a town center, you have an OCP designation for a mixed-use building, you now have a shelf-ready zone that you can rezone to. But not every site will be a perfect fit for that shelf-ready zone, however beautifully we've written it. And so how do we make that work? We don't necessarily want to rely on CD zones for every single application like we've been doing for the last 30 years. Instead, we can have the shelf-ready zone, but if there is something we need to tweak, we have a system called modifiers, where in brackets on the map, you can just add something that tweaks that. So in this case, C1 represents our core commercial zone, a mixed-use zone that can be fairly high density in the town centers. The base height in that zone is 6 stories, but there might be some sites where it's appropriate to go higher. Perhaps the OCP has it at a higher FSR that would accommodate a 12-lot building. So then we can just modify H and then the number of stories. It's just a way of building options and flexibility into the framework of the bylaw, but still allowing council that discretion as they consider individual applications.
On first glance, and
okay,
just thinking
that's
that
the
through,
end of the overview, the dry part of the outline.
I think it makes sense.
Jan said.
I think.
Any questions at this point, or do you want me to keep going?
Just anticipating a challenge down the road. So if I have a modifier on there, modifier is more specific to the individual property, therefore it would overrule, I'm trying to not use the word trump, It went over.
So right in the zone is language that would say, this is the height unless the modifier on the map says otherwise.
Right, and so, but then the problem becomes, the modifier is now, the more specific piece. And so if we went and we changed C2 to, recognize that over time, maybe those general things,
Maybe
we
instead of
would
it should be
also
6,
have to
it should be
change
the
all of the modifiers that don't conform with that new regulation for C2, because they're more specific, they're in conflict, collision with the C2.
I mean, I don't think it will be a big problem. First of all, wherever possible, we've used the base, but over time, there might be a number of modifiers. But if we were to change the base, say 5-10 years down the line, we have new OCP designations, it's time to refresh those base zones, they're probably going to become more permissive. So more of the sites would conform and wouldn't need a modifier at all. But it would require a bit of an exercise when you update a base zone to think about the implications. But I think when we update base zones, we do try to do that. And I think that would be kind of a necessary step of the work regardless.
Okay, Mr. Wilbur?
Your worship, but the alternative could be that we continue to do these CD zones, right? The challenge is that they're unique unicorns for every property, every time you create a CD zone. And if you were to go with the scenario you suggested, where you want to do a area-wide or neighborhood-wide modification, you're going to have to wrestle with those anyway, right? Under a circumstance, what we're hoping to do is clean those up as much as possible through the zoning update process, so that if you ever do go to those area-based discussions, then you're dealing with things like a modifier, which is an easier thing to modify than a full CD zone, which you'd have to pour into.
And we'll get into this a little bit more later on, but especially in the commercial areas, if you have the same zone across multiple lots, then businesses know that they can locate in any of those lots, as opposed to a series of CD zones where they have to read each one to see.
I was just
where
saying,
they
if
can
I was there.
relocate to.
62 slides. Damn.
System that allows us to use fewer number of zones and more regular zones more of the time will help us. It also, when you have a known zone and you're not rewriting it each time, it's not just less planning time for the planners, being of course selfishly interested here, but it also helps with our property use inspectors, it helps with our plan checkers because it's the same piece. And it helps with our designers and builders in the area because they know what to expect. And I think over time, it may help council too, as you come to know what that zone looks like. And it helps the community because it's a sense of, oh, I know what to expect in this area when they're saying that zone.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, might be advantageous to put some language in there that says the more specific of the two, the modifier versus the zone, is the predominant one, because, just backcasting is what we did with Marine Drive, so you take C9 zoning through the area, a whole bunch of CDs pop up along the way, because even though the land economists told us that C9 was gonna work, everybody wanted more than that. And then you go and you change C9, and now I have to go through a process to change all the modifiers as well separately. And so if you put something into the legislation that says more recent, more specific is the predominant one, then you can change the base zone and the modifiers you don't have to worry about where there's no conflict. Mr. Wilbur.
Great point. It's a very common standard interpretation clause that you'll include at the beginning of bylaws that refers to the more restrictive or the more limiting is essentially the one that is used. And so that deals with if there is any internal conflicts that are somehow missed. Hopefully there wouldn't be any, since this is a brand new bylaw from start to end. But when its bylaws get 60 years old, sometimes those internal conflicts that exact kind of interpretation clause can resolve.
Okay, I just need to add here, you know what's happened? Our mayor has become a planning nerd.
No.
I just love it.
I'm in the weeds, but I just think that's, we're trying to save ourselves future work on some of these things.
At least somebody is. Like, that's good that somebody's asking those questions.
As the example of what not to do when we blanket zoned it. Is it the CD zones that are preventing us from looking at that broader change to incorporate professional offices on a second floor, the three, and I know you're.
I mean,
Okay.
I don't know about you guys, but I kind of like Marine Drive. Like it's fine to me. Like your major street, commercial on the main floor, 2, 3, 4 stories of residential above. I mean, it makes sense. Maybe I'm missing something.
Check on what the uses are, and if you're going to tell us what those uses are under, and if they're the same as they've always been in the last 15 years in regards to parkland. Because we did have a time when PRO included mausoleums. And we never thought we were going to get an application for a mausoleum. And we did, 7 feet into the earth. And
12 stories, was it?
something like that. And so that's what created this need to redefine what these zones meant, to pull out those uses. So I think the uses, for us to just understand what those uses are as well, not just the zone, but understanding what's allowed under the zone, is what I've always understood and it's always been helpful. So
Yeah.
I don't see that
So-
list anywhere, but if it's coming.
No, and really I was trying to figure out, where do we start to tell this story? I'm absolutely happy to come back and do a deep dive on parks. The other thing is, we can also make the entire package available. Like this is anybody who's been asking for it, we've been sending.
It's not a
them.
secret.
It's not a secret,
We
it's
get
not
to look
behind
at
closed doors.
Yeah.
But essentially, the all park zones, they talked about buildings and,
Yeah.
and things you could build instead of the things you could do. And so really, parks are about recreation. And so what we're trying to do is create some clarity around how you recreate and what that enables you to do.
Okay, but that's an important part for us to understand because it's different for everyone and we need to understand what that impact is as well,
Yeah.
right?
And that might be one of the topics we bring back in the next section. Is
Okay.
happy to do a deeper dive. We are going to PNIAC next week on this, for example, so.
Okay, I'll wait for the rezoning of Marine Drive until we get to the next section.
PNIAC stands for Parks and Natural Environment
Yes.
Committee, so there you go. Okay, I don't see any questions, let's proceed.
Here we go.
Thank you, Tamsin. So this is my cue, and you mentioned uses. Oh, we're going to dive into uses shortly. But I want to take a few minutes through your worship just to address council and really set the stage a little bit for the employment zones work, because I know council has made comments along the way around how we're implementing our industrial zones and commercial zones and so on. So really, this is the first time we're kind of bringing it together as a package to you. And so I also want to talk a little bit about some key factors to consider, sort of what's happening on the ground, what are the trends and so on. So we recognize that the issues around commercial and industrial space availability and uses are deep and long. And so I just want to assure you, we're only starting this work. So we're taking advantage of the zoning bylaw rewrite process to really lift the work on this work, the lid on this work, and let you know that this is going to be ongoing, it's going to be incremental, it's going to be intentional work.
I mean, again, at first glance, I don't have any grave concerns with any of this.
So we're starting to roll out implementation of the economic development strategy. We have only begun consultation with interest groups around the commercial and industrial zones, and this will be ongoing. It is part of this process. It will continue as we create the zones, that we release the package, and we'll continue after June 30th because there's a lot more to do down the line. So just to use a metaphor, this is not a marathon. Sorry, this is not a sprint. It is a marathon. Even came out wrong, but it is really the first opportunity to tackle the policies of the economic development strategy. And just to remind you, on the commercial side, we are looking to add space, and we're looking to commercial space. We're looking to do this through more retail at grade in our mixed-use developments, and also look at office or service type uses at second level or around the corner in our town centers and along transit corridors. This is one of the key policies of the economic development strategy. And then on the industrial side, We have two objectives. We want to protect our major industrial sites for industrial use and trade enabling infrastructure. And we also want to look at our light industrial land use and really look at how are we going to optimize this land to accommodate the business growth that we expect coming in. So in terms of phasing, by June 30th, what we aim to achieve, provided that all of this package goes forward, we are looking to retain the current level of and types of uses across the employment zones that are currently in play. And with one small exception, and that will come up probably. And also we're looking to prepare some of these shelf-ready zones that Tamsin mentioned for commercial and industrial sites to look how to unlock that future redevelopment potential to accommodate that incremental change, market-driven, aligned with our future employment zones, work and the market conditions. So when we're done, when we create these shelf zones, it is very likely that not a whole lot of sites will actually fit under those shelf zones. Our follow-on work will align with the 5-year span of the economic development strategy, just to remind you how big this project is. We'll then focus on what are the parameters and conditions that are needed to effectively implement these new shelf zones. And we're looking at determining the sites, the additional policy updates that we might have to do, any incentives in our light industrial areas that we might need to provide or examine, and any other tools that are needed to successfully transition what our current commercial and industrial areas look like to what our new desired state is, as stated by the economic development strategy. And now just shifting gears very quickly, I think that's my next slide. I want to give you a little bit of a flavor of what our context is today. So there's some key factors to consider that are related to what the current state of our employment space is and where we want to go or where we need to go. First, we will need 4.2 million square feet of additional employment space to meet across all categories, industrial, commercial, and institutional, to meet our employment needs to 2050.
Okay.
This is in addition to
2050?
2050, yes, 2050. So we have 17 million today, and we will need 4.2.
I like that we're thinking 20 years into the future.
How many more workers is that?
I think I might have to ask Adam if he remembers, because that came as part of the economic development strategy. I think 11. Yeah.
Okay, so we don't have a new bridge.
What was the number?
Yeah, we don't have a
So
bridge.
that's, so 30 years of 11,150 additional net workers.
That use boats to get to work instead of cars.
Okay, Ms. Silova?
So only about 20% of the district's land that is developable for employment purposes, and there's no vacant lands. So what that means is employment space will need to be added through intensification on existing lands, on existing sites, and within existing growth areas. Huge limitation. Our second big factor here is our vacancy rates. And this is, usually vacancy rates are a snapshot in time, but it has been consistent over the last 5 years that I've been tracking the vacancy rates. We have some of the lowest in the region across our classes. And just to give you an example, our commercial vacancy is 1%. Our industrial vacancy is 2%. So any real estate folks that you ask, or any business that you ask, that is extremely considered unhealthy for businesses, meaning business has simply nowhere to go. There's no options to grow. There's no options to relocate. There's no options to move from one location to another within the district. So huge constraint. So we need to be working on that and adding that space. Other significant trends I wanted to mention are a little bit outside of, they impact district businesses, but they also are sort of regional and outside of district trends, impact a whole lot of businesses. The long-term trend towards transitioning to a service-based economy, which is related to population growth generally. So we think that about 70% of local businesses serve local population needs, so very service-oriented. On the flip side, the strategic and ongoing role of the Port of Vancouver as a gateway to international trade, and that role may be intensifying in the current climate, who knows. And of course, the need to preserve that trade enabling infrastructure and lands. Some other emerging trends, and I think Tamsin kind of touched upon these, is our major tourism operators need to adjust their operating models to address the impacts of climate change and so as to remain viable. So this is one thing that we're considering. And last but not least, while we're looking at Capilano University, universities are starting to look at their land banks to figure out how do we remain financially and operationally sustainable in the current student environment and financial shortages. And so some big overarching trends that impact us locally, I wanted to give you that flavor. So when we start the discussion on the different zones, it is the economic development strategy policy that we're looking to start implementing. We're only lifting the lid on this work. And please keep in mind these market factors as we move through the discussion, because they are very much the key things that influence our business. If there's no questions on any of this, I'll pass it over. Oh, yes, please. We don't still manage to slide. We don't have
Myself
questions.
and Councilor Murray, what population data is this predicated on? Is this the province's piece of vital statistics, the census numbers, the growth projections for Metro Vancouver? What's driving the need for 4.2 million square feet of additional employment space in terms of its relationship to population?
Through your worship, we're so fortunate to actually have the team that did the economic development strategy analysis, because this is what this data is based on. So this work was done in 2023 and released in 24. And I believe the latest numbers we used were Metro Vancouver's 2050 projections, yeah.
They were, drafted in Metro Vancouver 2050, so I believe there were some minor tweaks, but for the most part, for the district, I believe they're in the same ballpark. And they were based on employment by sector. We did break out that 4.2 between commercial, industrial, and institutional jobs as well. I tied them back to my use based on trends at the time as we understood them, about how much floor space you would need roughly per worker within the district, recognizing the constraints and changing nature of work.
What 2050 population do you think is on the back end of that?
On the back end of that, given the timing we were working with, that was prior to the changes, the immigration numbers that had changed. So I believe that there might be a slight softening in some of those numbers, but I don't have the exact change for comparison setting on hand right now, unfortunately.
That would be interesting to see that.
Yeah, unfortunately, within all of the decisions we're getting from Metro and TransLink and others, they're blending a bunch of different number sources, thinking that diversification is going to solve the prediction and forecasting problem. And the reality is we probably lost about 1,700 people in the district of North Vancouver in the last year. And so it's a lot of the bases for predictions for growth are challenging.
Where's that number from?
They're pie in the sky. They're pie in the sky numbers is what they are.
Results of last year, the population, and it's a blending of two things. It's about 1,200 people-ish of net loss, but a transfer of about 400 people from being counted in the district to being counted in West Van. That's the area around International Plaza. They're as a group now going to count it entirely. So I'm not including the 400 that's just a straight transfer, because that's not contemplating new growth or new losses. But we knew that the provincial numbers were expecting in Q1 last year, a 40,000 person increase approximately, and we went down by 1,500. Q2, again, supposed to be an increase, we went down by 2,500 and province-wide. And then Q3, again, predicted an increase, and we went down, I think, by about 14,000 during Q3. So we're all still waiting on the Q4 numbers from last year to get a better picture on what the actual numbers, annual numbers are.
I'm still not getting what the source of those numbers is.
It's BC Vital Statistics, I believe. Mr. Milder? Yeah.
Worship, two sources we look at. BC Stats does population projections. They have a certain formula, they call people projections. They adjust it, and periodically when the census data comes in. So they do what both actually estimates of current population as well as population projections. Metro Vancouver also updates their scenarios periodically. I think the last ones we have to work with are about the Metro Vancouver medium growth scenario to 2041 is about 114,000 people in the district. But again, they always modify and tweak. And we all know that there were significant modifications with respect to students and immigrants that have affected population right across Canada. And so that is an adjustment that Metro Vancouver, BC Stats, everybody's trying to adapt to. The one point I would make though, I know that number looks like a very, very large number.
It is.
We aren't proposing to pre-zone 4.2 million square feet of development. And also I thought, I just very quickly checked back to see, to give you some context of growth, how much commercial and how much industrial square footage has net increased since council approved their OCP in 2011. And it's around 350,000 square feet of new commercial and around 400,000 square feet of new industrial square footage since the OCP adopted in 2011, so around 15 years. So that gives you an idea of scale of uptake. And through that whole time, we've had very low vacancy, even with that increase.
The big number is the vacancy number that the businesses are concerned about, because this is what is creating the squeeze on the rents. This is what is creating the squeeze on business uses and things like that. It's a good point that it's a moving target, and probably the next good number or decent number we're going to get is from the census, the 2026 census. That is somewhat, but it is a moving target. And I should mention that I think when the housing legislation started coming in, and there were a whole slew of new numbers being thrown, and of course employment and jobs waits for all these big numbers like population and housing and all of these to get determined incomes after. We took the high scenario because of the new housing agenda when we were doing the estimates for the economic development strategy. So possibly that number is overestimated at this rate.
Possibly.
If we are looking to build capacity to meet our 2050 targets, if it's 200 or even if it's 1 million square feet less, if that 1 million square feet was in the market today, we won't have the business issues that we're having in the North Shore.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It just seemed like a big number because I think Vancouver's number is 6 million. That they have 6 million square feet of planned over the next 10 years, but they have 10 times as much population as us. And so for them absorbing 6 million in that fraction of the same amount of time, it seems like we have a very high ratio. And that the challenge is, and this is probably for the discussion afterward, but the challenge would be, I don't have a bridge. We don't have a replacement plan for the bridges, and our current traffic problems from the time of the OCP start. We're fighting against the narrative in the community. The community believes that it's because that the traffic problems are because the population's increased on the North Shore. And the reality is it's because the number of workers has increased on the North Shore quite dramatically in that time. And so
interesting.
You tell me we need to, over the next 25 years, get another 11,000 additional jobs on the North Shore. That catches my attention. I've got Councillor Murray and Councillor Monk. Councillor Murray.
I think it's a combination of everything. It's 3 different municipalities. It's, people living in West Van and working in North Van and vice versa. People coming onto the North Shore, off the North Shore to work. I mean, the line going over the bridge in the morning is as long as the line's coming over the bridge right now. It's not, it used to be a little bit more skewed. Now it's even.
True.
So, there's all sorts of different reasons, and you and I can discuss that whole scenario. You think that development doesn't add to the traffic because there's a significant amount of development that's being, seen in the city of North Vancouver, and people move back and forth. The lineup going to Seymour in the morning, into the Seymour, and you would say, where are they going? But they are coming into the Seymour. When we talk about this squeezing of the rents, is that like what? Is that because we've done little to look at the change of some of our industrial areas, for instance? I know you've had a discussion with some local realtors that have given you, that are commercial realtors, long time, 30-year commercial realtors in the community that would like to continue the discussion. So I'm glad we're giving opportunities to those groups to come forward and talk more. Because I think they have a lot to say about real time. And I've mentioned this before, that we don't always, as governments, operate very well in real time because things change so quickly and we
No
don't
shit.
pivot. So how much of that is, you know, not changing the zoning bylaw for so long and not addressing these things? I feel like we can see these problems, they begin to fester, and then we just do nothing. We don't pivot. I can't wait till we get to the second story of the commercial, because I've been talking about that for 10, 15 years, and we won't pivot. So is that's the crux of it?
Through your worship to Councillor Murray, there's many factors behind the vacancy rate. It's hard to say. It's, you know, half of it is because of this and half of it. The point is it is low, and it is what is driving some of these costs. Both our industrial and commercial rates, both of them are high compared to the rest of the region. And I speak generically the rest of the region because we get the averages. We are close to Vancouver on some of this, just to give you a comparison. Our commercial rates are about 50, I heard 60 per square foot. And our industrial are about 30, light industrial is about 30 per square foot. And it is those unhealthy levels of vacancy that are squeezing both markets. There's the pecking order of the markets, right? You have the light industrial, you have the retail, the office, light industrial, and then you go to other uses and residentials beyond that. So there's that cascading spillover effect in the squeeze. So squeeze, and
Yeah.
rents go up and up and up.
And then I would be also interested in understanding what's happening with the report that was brought to Metro, because there was, you know, it was intensification, and you talked about that, the intensification of light industrial. And, you know, I see that it's more about expanding beyond the urban containment boundary, rezoning, you know, parkland to light industrial or, you know, commercial. And then parkland to residential, and it's all moving around. The level of intensity in the discussion that exists when we're looking at expanding beyond the urban containment boundary in the region is not happening. Like, where is the intensification of light industrial? And the report was good, and it was like, yes, okay, this is some of the solution. We can go up, we can rise up in industrial. It does not all have to be, you know, spread out. And yet, is it really happening?
Yeah, go ahead.
The report question was excellent. It covered a lot of the details about what is needed to go up. Industrial is at that precipice where buildings are starting to pencil, where you can do two-story warehouses. You're seeing where they can build around surrounding the trucks out there. But there are many factors especially in the Metro Vancouver, Lower Mainland context, that make it very difficult for those buildings to be economic.
Right.
They need to be large enough. They need to be close enough to major infrastructure. It's very difficult to build a multi-story industrial parcel on small lots where you do not have the entitlements to build that high. And even if you do allow the density, sometimes if there's, as Neil mentioned, competing uses that may otherwise be more economically viable, they might outcompete that industrial use, for example. So it can be very difficult to create the opportunities for industrial intensification. Sometimes you need to bring in other types of employment. But that also does bring in risks for squeezing out some of the existing industrial that may still be looking for that older, smaller lot, smaller bay type. And so it is a very challenging, very nuanced discussion that goes into this. You are right, though, that this leads to some discussions about, do we find easy land further afield where appropriate, and do we try to intensify in certain areas where appropriate? There's also geological considerations, the type of land that we take in. So many
And
challenges.
access.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, and then my other question, and maybe this is, I hope this is going to be covered too, is that we made a decision, you know, many years ago to allow childcare in every zone. And we allowed it in light industrial zones. And so what has that done?
Got a slide on?
Okay, I am just predicting the next, I didn't even look forward in the 60s slide deck. It was frightening.
Excellent.
Councillor Mah.
Frightening is right.
Thank you. I think I remember this 11,000 number from when the economic strategy was presented, and that's supposed to be by 2050. I was just wondering, do you have any sense of the 11,000 forecast new employees?
how many will be living on the North Shore and potentially commuters? And the reason I bring this up is when we talk to the chamber now, that's a challenge. Even in our current situation, the chamber is saying we can't find employees because they can't live in North Shore, or if they get a job, you know, they can get the same job in Coquitlam, or they can get it here. If they get it here, they have to drive for 2 hours. So they're not going to come here. So I'm just wondering, does this take into account what needs to happen on housing? So it's great. I'm all for business, but what else needs to happen? And is that taken into account somehow?
Mr. Milton, just take a first stab at that, and others are happy to jump in. Affordable housing in the North Shore is an economic development initiative. That's the way I would describe it. So when we ask our businesses what some of their key issues are, obviously it changes with different circumstances. Many folks would mention tariffs and those kind of concerns now too. But on the North Shore, consistently folks mention the transportation issues and housing. So all of council's efforts around inclusionary zoning.
No shit.
Working with the province and the federal government around funding affordable housing opportunities, so social housing in the community, those will benefit local workers. And that we hear time and time again from our business industry that those policy initiatives, which the zoning bylaw will help implement through council's discussion. Now we're straying into policy discussions, right, which are kind of at the OCP level. The zoning, and I'll bring it back to the zoning presentation, we're really looking at implementing the OCP direction you've already given, which talks about more housing in centers, close to transit, so that these folks can move to their jobs as easy as possible on the North Shore. That's the hope, and that's one key issue.
I can follow up with that. And Hampton, you mentioned something about not pre-zoning on a broad scale, but we also potentially are looking at inclusionary zoning. Rezoning. So how does that jive?
Okay, so we've been following along with community planning as you think about the merits and the viability of inclusive zoning. We've structured the framework of the zoning bylaw, the draft one, so that every zone has a line that says inclusionary zoning, ? And essentially, if it works, either now or at some point in the future, it's easy to build that in. And the way inclusionary zoning has worked in other municipalities that have started to explore this, and we met with planners from Vancouver and somewhere else earlier in this process, was you have a reference in individual zones to a section or a chapter, if you will, that has the rates and the requirements. And that way you're really just updating one page of your bylaw as those requirements might change over time. But the individual zones reference the percentage or the aspect that's required. And again, those modifiers we talked about earlier, that very nerdy thing, well, you can have IZ, inclusionary zoning, as a modifier. So not every site, so you could have the same zone across an area, but if it's only feasible to have inclusionary zoning on a few properties within that area, or in the denser area as opposed to the less dense area, then you can apply it as appropriate to the study at the time. So we're very much protecting for that potential, should we have the economic viability to explore that, and should council wish to explore that. But we're not presupposing what you ultimately decide.
Just one last one. Sorry, is it Adam?
Yes.
You mentioned earlier, if I heard you right, about like light industrial zone, like there's going to be competing interests and operators, and some businesses can afford the higher rent. So
We're diving into the next section. Yeah.
okay, because we need to find a way. In my mind, we need to find a way to not quite curate the space, but encourage certain businesses that are part of that zone, not necessarily excluding others, but that's a balancing act. Like a perfect example, I love Ridge Brewing, but they're in a light industrial area. That changes the whole market.
I think everybody is very anxious to get to those topics.
Okay.
To get to them. Are there any other questions? I didn't anticipate questions just on my little slides, but Tamsin, take us away.
We're good? Okay. So we're going to start with a discussion around the commercial zones. We do have a discussion on industrial coming after that. So If it's just on commercial right now, it's okay, there's more to come.
Okay,
So, commercial task. For several years, we've been talking about the scourge of the dentists, if you will, right? The
the medical office, yeah.
the medical offices, and of course, I also need to go to the dentist sometimes, so I totally realize we need those healthcare professionals. But it's that desire to see our streets be vibrant shopping streets. And I know in recent applications, I've done it too, where I've written zoning bylaws for individual sites, where I've worked with developers and said, oh, wouldn't it be nice if these CRUs could just be for restaurant or retail uses, because we really want the vibrancy. So when we started this process, that was where I was thinking, right, we'll write a zone, we'll limit the uses to just retail and restaurant uses, and all of the other uses can go upstairs. Made sense. Right, so then we started thinking about how that works. So, and zoning is only one tool. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. I might come back to this afterwards, though we've kind of covered it. I'll also come back to this one, because I want to dig straight into the use. Sorry, I will get there, but this is exciting.
Oh my God, take a breath. In through the nose, out through the mouth.
Dude.
Slow down.
Okay, sorry. So, essentially, when we started by looking at individual neighborhoods, and you'll see a lot of slides on Edgemont, and I started with Edgemont because it's our most successful. It's the one where everybody loves that village. It feels lovely. It's got great cafes, it's got nice restaurants. It feels like the right mix. Interesting. But when you start to look at, and the next slides will show you, it's actually 40% of the uses are not restaurant or retail. And you know, it's walking distance, so I can go there at lunchtime, and I watch. And all kinds of people are coming for those other purposes, right? Whether it's to renew your insurance, to take your dog to the vet, you know, those kinds of things are bringing people to the village. And that
True.
helps keep the village more vibrant. And while there, they might stop and pick up a coffee or get that card for so-and-so's birthday. It just helps that vitality of the community. The other thing, and this comes back to Neo's point about vacancy rates and also about our limited supply. If we don't permit these uses at grade, where else do they go? So let's dig into this a little bit more. So here are some pictures from Edgemont. We've got several banks in Edgemont. We've got an optometrist. Well, an optometrist is one of those medical uses, but it also has that retail component, right? It's a positive. We've got, and it's not on this slide, but we've got the new pharmacy next to the Beyond Bar that has a medical office built into it. And you're seeing more and more pharmacies are doing that combined piece. Well, the pharmacy is retail, but the medical piece is that health office. So right away, we're starting to get into some fuzzy area. Barbershop is a classic one for saying, oh yeah, that's a Main Street use. Well, what about the hair salon? Well, maybe that's okay, but the hair salon often has the facials or the manicures or the other things built in. So it becomes this slippery slope. And yes, we could write definitions, but they become very, very picky. If we just went with that retail restaurant only, immediately 40% of our long-term businesses become non-conforming. They could continue to operate, but they could never relocate in the village. So that seems like a problem to us. So we started to think about different ways of doing this. And this is that list of uses again, recognizing the variety that's there. I won't dig into it too much. We also looked at Marine Drive because it felt like that one had lots of healthcare offices. Then we started looking at the numbers and walking around because so often Marine Drive, you drive around, right? And the reality is there are actually a lot of restaurants, but they're hidden, like Tim Hortons, very popular cafe, not really cafe, culture cafe, but a coffee shop.
You call it a restaurant.
but it's hidden behind a sea of parking. White Spark is the one that bugs me the most because the building is right on the street, but they've put paper or whatever over their windows and they've turned to face the parking lot. And so many of them are doing that. We do have a lot of restaurant and retail uses. It's actually still a 30 to 40% mix of uses that are that would be non-conforming, but it's how it's built, which now I'll go backwards for a moment, comes the other part of zoning, where there are some things we can very simply do through zoning about bringing the buildings right. And that whole why we don't want a 1960s bylaw, this is one of those things. In the 60s, we were car happy. And we had just built the bridge, and we were building all of these suburbs, so our zones were written for cars. Today, when we write a commercial zone, we want to make sure the buildings are close to the sidewalk. We want to move the parking around the back, and underground. We want to move.
All right, I'm going to wrap up on that tonight. The zoning bylaws, I don't think there's a lot to be said there. And I mean, for me, anything that can be done to simplify the permitting process and to clarify expectations of what can or can't be done on a piece of property is pretty much the most important thing, right? Anything that we're doing to that end is massively huge. And I mean, I would say for me, my number one takeaway from the earlier workshop is that this SSMUH stuff is extremely scary, very, very concerning, poorly thought out. I mean, there's literally nothing positive to say about it other than it's just stupid. And EB and whomever else put this forward, they need to answer for their stupidity, because this is easily the dumbest hunk of shit legislation that has ever been. Well, no, not that it's ever been. Like, this is one of the dumbest, for sure, pieces of legislation that have ever been put forward in the province of British Columbia. And it is going to have long-reaching and long-lasting impacts if we do not get this thing taken off the books and deleted, because it is absolute garbage. And it is just so poorly thought out, folks, right? If you're not worried about what you're gonna bathe your kids with, like if there's no water, right? Because the reservoirs have run dry because there's too many people, right? If you care about your kids, if you care about yourself, right? Like, these are the kinds of things that are really going to have a lasting impact on you. And this is factually accurate. Like, I know that you might think I'm over here like banging my drum and being an alarmist or whatever else. Dudes, with our current population, we're already having watering restrictions during the summer with our current population. And I don't, like, honestly, like, I mean, do I care about watering restrictions? Yeah. I mean, like, they bother me a little bit, but like, they're not like, if people's grass goes brown in the summer, like, who really cares, right? But if we can't wash our dishes, if we can't shower, right? Like, this is the kind of thing that, like, people do not, I don't think everybody really understands. And God, I really hope that, you know, at least somebody out there listens to my content and starts to challenge the status quo and starts to really think about how, and some why. But like, mostly, like, I'm a builder. I create things, I build things, and I understand how these things are built. And I understand what goes on behind the walls. And I think that gives me a unique perspective as to, you know, how to go about thinking about and considering these things. And also, you know, as a long-term North Shore resident, I really, like, I don't want to live here. I mean, honestly, I already think there's too much development that's happened on the North Shore. There's too many people as it is. The infrastructure is effed, right? Like, our roads are constantly clogged now, constantly. I mean, my God, like, Saturdays and Sundays, I mean, it's like an unusual win if there's not traffic coming down the cut. So, you know, folks, like, we've got to start standing up for ourselves. And, you know, if none of those things concern you, how about the current 350 hospital bed shortage that we have? Like, we don't have enough hospital beds to service our current number of citizens. We increase the population of the North Shore by 50%. We're likely to be somewhere in the 700 to 800 bed shortfall range without some major changes to what's going on. So listen, if you find any of this content interesting, entertaining, or whatever else, I sure hope you'll like and subscribe the video and subscribe to the channel. Share this with your friends. I sure would. My hope is that, you know, we get a decent little community here on this channel on Monday nights, and we just sit down and we talk about what is being discussed in these council meetings and really learn, you know, what's going on. And, you know, I would say with the zoning stuff there, I mean, it seems like some of this stuff is on the right track. I'm honest, I've been going since 6 this morning. It's now 8:15 and I am done. So, but nonetheless, folks, let's stay interested. Let's get in there. Let's make sure that we have our voices be heard. And, you know, to conclude tonight's stream, Councillor Hanson, Councillor Pope, couldn't disagree with you guys more on your positions or your takes. There was a staff member that was pretty adamant about not having basements in the ground. Disagree with her too. But be that as it may, thank you for watching. Have a great night. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye now.